Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 26 of the Town Hall meeting. This is going to be the Frost Giants special with three of the people, the good people that are going to work on the upcoming new RTS game. I'm pretty excited for this one. I know you guys have done a lot of talk shows already and podcasts, and you've already explained a lot of stuff about the game. But today we get to kind of hear from the Warcraft 3 point of view and the Warcraft 3 scene about the brand new game. So let's introduce everybody. We've got Carson, who's a North American. He can do it all. He's a musician. He's a Warcraft 3 commentator, pretty good orc player. Anything else that could introduce you well, Carson, besides that?
I'm on ToDGaming. I'm a coach for them, but I don't really do anything. I just sort of yell at the players and act as though I know what I'm talking about and do that as well.
Yeah. And then we got Ramo the Demo Man. I fixed the camps just now. Warcraft 3 commentator, played and casted the game for a super long time. Lead balance designer for Warcraft 3 as well. Some people might say so as well. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm looking forward to this town hall. Deeply involved in the Warcraft scene and looking forward to what the Frost Giants guys will be providing in the future, and in general, a big RTS fan. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, thank you.
And then I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. Kevin, I know you used to work for Blizzards. I'm trying to fix the cast at the same time, so go ahead, introduce yourself, Kevin.
Hi, my name is Kevin. You may also know me as Monk, which is my handle online. I'm the lead co-op designer for the Frost Giants new game, and prior to that, I was the lead co-op designer for StarCraft 2. Prior to that, I worked for Team Liquid as a general project manager, doing lots of random stuff with StarCraft and esports. And just throughout, I've been a big Warcraft fan, even prior to that. So that's me.
Tim Morton.
All right. Let's see. I used to be the production director on StarCraft 2. I left Blizzard about a year ago now, and along with Tim Campbell, who's about to introduce himself, set up Frost Giant to build the next great RTS. Tim and I also both have some CNC experience. I'm sure Tim will talk about that, but I was on Generals 2, which sadly didn't get released at EA Los Angeles for a few years before I was at Blizzard. But just a huge, passionate fan of the genre since Warcraft 2, which was my first game that I played in RTS. But Tim C., on to you.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Warcraft 1 and 2, it really helped get me into the industry. I worked at Westwood early on Red Alert 2 and some of their Command and Conquer games, and then I had the chance to work at Blizzard, where I was lead campaign designer on Warcraft 3 and Frozen Throne, and just a huge fan of the genre. That's what I'm in this industry to make, and most recently, I was game director on Wasteland 3 in Exile on Microsoft before leaving to start this company with Tim and the rest of the guys. And now my role is game director, which means I'm kind of like Carson. I get to just yell at the devs and act like I know what I'm doing. Just try to keep things on track that way.
Okay, I would love to go a little bit more in depth about our precise history in RTS. So as a way for me and the other two Warcraft 3 guys, Carson and Remo, to introduce ourselves to you guys, so you know pretty much how much we're experienced with RTS, and then you guys can do the same, even though you just kind of did with the intro. If we want to add something, if you don't, then that's fine. But for myself, I started playing Warcraft 3 in 2002 or something, 2003, pretty much when it came out, and became a pro player until 2008, and played in tournaments around the world, pretty much everywhere. And then I didn't play StarCraft 2 immediately when it came out. I think I started maybe late 2011 or something like that, through to 2015, where I became a full-time commentator on the game. So I've been playing RTS games for a majority of my life. So far, mostly Blizzard games, but I'm very excited about your game, and I'm always excited about any good RTS. I have played a little bit of other RTS outside of that, a little bit of Brood War or other games, but never did I enjoy it as much necessarily as Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2, the two games that I was a professional on. Carson, what's your story?
Cool. So I'm a little bit young for these sorts of games. I'm 24, but I bought Warcraft 3 in the battle chest, I think, at about 2004. And I didn't start playing it until like 2009 or something, but I was still playing it in high school. So I played Warcraft for about 11 years before that. I played StarCraft Brood War with my brother, as everyone did, and he used to always beat me because he was older than me. So yeah, I played RTS pretty much my whole life. I've also played a lot of other games, but not quite as much of an OG as everyone else in this scene, just because, you know, I was in diapers when everyone started playing professionally.
Remo? Oh, you
So I started
wait,
playing.
wait.
Wait,
Mute yourself in the whereby, please. We hear you double.
All right, sorry. Okay. So I started playing competitively Counter-Strike, but that doesn't count. So my first experience with Warcraft was when I was 13 years old, something like that, in middle school. One of my friends told me that there was such a thing as Warcraft and internet. At that time, I was still oblivious to that fact. I didn't have any kind of DSL connection, but he quickly introduced me to the magic of online play and to Footman Frenzy, where I quickly fell in love with what the custom game genre and Warcraft could offer. And he showed me one game of, I think Warden or something was okay. And then the next game involved Avalanche. To everyone that remembers Footman Frenzy, if you remember Avalanche and his Blink one-hit death combo, then
500
shout out
damage.
to you. And ever since then, I've been absolutely shackled, fascinated, and trembled in fascination with that game, and it never let up. It started with custom games and continued going with standard play, and that's how I got here. Yeah.
That's a very detailed history. I was like,
That's
he's going
why
to tell
I'm
us
here.
about
So,
every
you
game
know,
he's ever
I
played.
love to talk. That's why I'm here.
Kevin?
Yeah, for my first RTS game was Warcraft 2, but I mostly played the campaign. And then I moved on to StarCraft 1 and Brood War, where I played a lot of custom maps like Big Game Hunters, that kind of stuff. Moving into Warcraft 3 is probably the game that I was really involved in the most. At first, I probably have about 20,000 hours in that game. And at one point, I watched every replay from replays.net over the course of 4 years. I watched like pretty much everything from WAG TV and all those things back in the golden days of Warcraft 3, I'd say. I also played a lot of custom games. I got really into 3 very specific custom games. Footman Frenzy, the original No Hunters version, a MOBA called Tides of Blood, and something you might know, Castle Fight, which is kind of the precursor to Direct Strike from StarCraft 2. From then on, in 2010, I moved on to StarCraft 2, where I also probably have about 20,000 hours of. And then professionally, I started working for Team Liquid and then joined the StarCraft 2 development team from there.
You watch every replay from replays.net. You must be a pretty good player, huh?
I was okay.
Yeah. Okay. I know you play a lot of 2-on-2s these days. We haven't had the chance to meet yet in 2-on-2. Tim Morton?
For me, yeah, I mentioned War 2 was sort of my entry. I was already working in games at that point. I was working on MechWarrior 2, this giant robot combat game. And I think when War 2 came out, it kind of swept the team like a pandemic, but in a good way, the good kind of pandemic. And we all got hooked, and I'm pretty convinced it slowed down our development for a while. But yeah, RTS, it was just kind of a revelation for me. I think just the depth of gameplay, strategic aspects, like we all know because we're RTS players, but there's so much that is unique and great about the genre. So yeah, I went on to play the early CNCs from there. I don't know what else. Total Annihilation came after that. Yeah, tried kind of all kinds of RTSs along the way. But I reached a point where I was finished at one company and I needed to find a new job. And this friend of mine, Dustin Browder, who also worked on MechWarrior 2 back in the day, was transitioning off of StarCraft onto Heroes of the Storm at Blizzard, and he mentioned that they needed some folks with my skill set at Blizzard to take on StarCraft 2, and it was just this incredible opportunity. I was a huge fan of StarCraft and StarCraft 2. Incredible opportunity to go work on a game that I already loved in this genre that was my favorite genre. Just couldn't pass it up. It was really exciting.
Great, thank you. Tim Campbell.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to go to college at University of California, Irvine, which is I didn't know at the time, but it was right at the kind of heart of the game development community in Irvine, and right when online gaming was starting to become a thing in the very earliest days. So Doom 2 and Duke Nukem 3D and Warcraft 1 and 2 and the early Command and Conquers. And my grades suffered a bit because I was playing too much at the time. I just really fell into it hard. And then while I was in college, managed to land my first internship at a local company and then worked in the Irvine game development community, which, again, right place at the right time. Both Westwood and Blizzard were based in Irvine at that time. And so I was able to have a chance to work at both of those great companies on their franchises and have a blast working on it. So for me, this chance at Frost Giant to kind of circle back to those days and those experiences and the genre I love and kind of one of the big on ramp that brought me into the industry is just a incredible opportunity, something I'm super grateful for.
Okay, so my third point here is a little bit vague. Like, I'm not sure how to approach this, but what I wrote down was possible similarities between Frost Giant and RTS games, in particular Warcraft 3, because as far as I know, not much has been said in regards to how the game is going to be at all. So is there? Can you tell us about like where you're at in terms of what similarities there might be, if you can even say anything? Like what do you want to prioritize with the game currently, or just talking about the game in general, I guess.
I'll jump in and then maybe pass the torch to these guys. But the first thing I want to say is that we're super early in our process. Like the team really just assembled in September. A lot of these guys were finishing up the 10th anniversary patch for StarCraft 2. So we've only had a few months to really sink our teeth in and even have internal design conversations. But there's sort of a variety of favorite RTSs across the team. And I think Tim Campbell, obviously coming off his experience on Warcraft 3, is a strong representative for the War 3 perspective on design. Kevin also has a lot of War 3 there. Obviously, Star 2 is represented because we have a number of Star 2 players. There's one person who is a big fan of Company of Heroes, so that comes up in our design discussions from time to time as well. But because it's so early, it's hard for us to say exactly how close it's going to be to any of those games. I think definitely we want it to feel very familiar to fans of Blizzard RTS, and even just saying Blizzard RTS, like Brood War to Star 2 to War 3, like those are three such different games. There's certainly common threads, but we're doing a lot of deconstruction of the things we like about other RTS games and sort of trying to weave those through, but also having conversations like the Reddit conversation that we've had around Heroes, which clearly is a very War 3 topic. So I think where we land will be influenced by all of these things. And it probably won't be exactly like any one of them, but I don't know, Tim and Kevin probably add better color to that. So
yeah, I think from my side, one of the things that I've learned across all the games I've worked on is that development is not a straight line. It definitely involves exploration and trying ideas and finding the fun and really following after that. Now, that said, we have a pretty good idea of the place that we want to land in. We are very consciously making a game that will appeal to fans of Blizzard RTS games. We're not making a mobile. We're not making a super casual game. We're not really trying to reboot the genre to make it fundamentally different. We are really trying to step into a space that we love, that we know inside and out. We've developed it, we've played it, we are familiar with games kind of across the spectrum in it, and we want to land squarely in there. Now, I believe personally that the RTS genre has a ton of design space to explore still, even within that core RTS model. If you look at Brood War to Warcraft 3 to Starcraft 2, these games have very different mechanisms within them, even though they have an overall feel and structure that's similar. And so I think you could expect to see from our game something similar, where it will definitely be in the space that appeals to fans of Warcraft 3 or Starcraft 2, but that also is trying out some new ideas and really trying to make this something special in its own right.
Yeah, one way I like to think about where our game will eventually end up is our game will probably be as different from StarCraft and Warcraft 3 as they are to each other. Now, these two games, they obviously are very different from each other. Like, obviously, one has heroes and one doesn't. One has creeps, one has items, and the other doesn't. But when you take a look at both these games, they also share a lot of similarities. They both have two resources, for example. They both have similar ways to control these units. They have similar economies. So I would say again, another way I imagine it is that our game might be something like 25% Warcraft, 25% Starcraft, 25% inspiration from other RTSs, and then 25% kind of our own ideas.
Remo and Carlson, if you guys have any questions.
Yeah, I have one. You guys talk about having very deep conversations about both Warcraft and StarCraft. I'm wondering if there's anything from your guys' experiences, either developing the games or playing the games, any mistakes they made, anything you guys think you can clearly improve upon, something we've learned from both of these games at all?
We probably say opportunities more than mistakes, just because we love both those games so much that it's hard to say they screwed up. I don't think they did, but there's stuff that you see as trends that we think we could even extend and make even better. This one is less about competitive, but definitely the introduction of cooperative as a mode and start to, which really is what brought Kevin to Blizzard in the first place. That was something that it was sort of hotly debated inside the team before Legacy of the Void came out. I think there was a contingent that felt like adding a new mode is just a distraction. We already know that players love competitive. We already know that players love campaign. Let's just focus on those. And even for the designers who defended it, and it's a good thing that they did because it turned out great, but even for them, I don't think any of us expected that would become the most popular mode in the game. Like that really was a surprise. So that's an example of an opportunity, like just something where there was a bunch of potential that we feel like is worth discussing even for the future of how we could extend that even further. But I don't know, Kevin and Tim, other stuff you guys can think of?
Yeah, okay, I'll go. Yeah, I don't necessarily think of it in terms of mistakes that I would want to correct. There are definitely areas that I would like to explore more, or I would have liked to have had the chance to push further. But the realities of dev schedules are such that even in a when it's done scenario, you still have to be at some point kind of pulling all those threads together into the final cloth, And so I think with the Frozen Throne, we started exploring some more of those ideas with the campaign. We tried out new ideas with the Orc campaign in the Frozen Throne. It was fundamentally different than the campaigns before that. There are a lot of ideas that even after the Frozen Throne that were left on the table, that I would love to be able to return to and really really try to see what we could do with those things. I think that there's even around the Warcraft model, if you zoom into any one of its modes, whether it's items or neutral buildings or heroes or how they level or things like that, a lot of what we decided on was were I think good decisions, really solid decisions for the time. and for when the game was made, and Blizzard was transitioning to 3D. Computers were only capable of so much, and we worked within those constraints to create systems like upkeep, for example, and things like that were important for us at that time. And we have different considerations now. Fast forward all these years later, and so the interesting challenge for us is to build a game that feels spiritually like it's in the same family, but that is a product of these times. It's a modern game in every sense, and deals with different constraints and different limitations on it than maybe a game made back then did. And that opens up some decisions, and it definitely, I think, frees us in certain ways. And that's where we're seeing a lot of opportunities that we want to pursue.
Yeah, and for me, as Tim Morton had mentioned, within the team, we are talking a lot about dissections of both Warcraft 3 and the StarCraft franchise, and what we liked about them, what we like less about them. So again, I won't frame it as like mistakes, but I'll talk about what I liked about one game over the other. And one thing I like about Warcraft 3 is that compared to StarCraft 2, the way in which you engage with your opponent's base, with their workers, with their economy, is very different between race to race. Whereas in StarCraft 2, a lot of it is about just killing workers. You're not harassing buildings as much. You're just trying to get as many workers killed as possible. Whereas in StarCraft 2, whereas in Warcraft 3, I feel like it's a lot more nuanced. Different races have different vulnerabilities. For example, humans, peasants are very vulnerable. Orc burrows are very vulnerable before fortified armor. It's traditionally hard for undead to expand, for example, and then night elf, they don't really have any units that can attack in their main base. And not only that, there's the option not only to harass workers, but also buildings as well, which I feel is a little more lacking in StarCraft 2. Now, on the other side, what do I like about StarCraft 2 or StarCraft over Warcraft 3? And what I like there is the idea of territory control and expanding your economy. I feel like in Warcraft 3, a lot of times, especially in the old days, you are limited to one and at most two bases. And I feel like a lot of the most exciting games in the past have been, for example, Moon taking expansions all over the map, sometimes even charming a peasant and getting an Archmage and a Blood Mage as well. Those games are really fun, and especially in these days with more recent balance. I don't know if anyone got that reference, but especially these days with more recent balance, I do feel like expansions are a lot more common, and I am enjoying a lot of the games that we see compared to before.
Remo, you got anything to ask to this guy?
I feel like I was thrown in here. No, I do agree with most of the points. I don't know. I feel like we're moving from exposition to questions. In that case, I suppose I'm here to ask questions, and so that's what I'll do.
Ask more about that charmed peasant. That
Oh
sounded
my
interesting.
god! Everybody knows about this. What is this?
All right. Listen. There's a term in the community. It's called blood castle, and we leave it at that. Okay. We don't want to. We don't want to go deeper. But something that surprised me about the process of Frost Giant and about the game development was the quick reveal of the project and the strategy. Usually, especially us as Warcraft fans and Blizzard fans, we are used to a certain timeline. Everyone is left in suspense and in wondering as to what might happen, and nothing is revealed until at some point there is a game reveal, and then usually in Blizzard standards between 3 and 0 years it gets revealed. So at the point of revealing it, within 3 years it might get released, with the exception of Diablo, which took longer. But you seem to have taken another step where you very deliberately chose to reveal the intention of developing a game without much of a backbone, and I don't mean that discouragingly or negatively, but you clearly said that there's not too much work so far that has gotten into it as to what has brought you to this point. So my question is, why has the strategy changed so much, where so early in the development you decided to share your goals in a process that I can only imagine is years away from happening. And as early as it is, it seems like, truthfully, it is not possible for you to predict when it might come out. So, reiterating, back in Blizzard days, there was only an announcement happening when you could somewhat accurately predict when it might be coming out. But now you are much more transparent in the fact that you say, we have a project going, and from the outward perspective, it seems like you have no way of telling when it might come out. So where did that change of philosophy come in, and what prompted it?
Yeah, I love this question. And again, I'm going to jump in and let these guys share their thoughts after. But the first thing I want to say is when you work on a game, and or even a genre in this case, it goes beyond a game, because it's not just about StarCraft or War 3. It's about RTS as a scene. You get really attached to the scene and to the people in the scene and to the players and to the rest of the development team that you work with. And we didn't want to see RTS diminish in any way. We, in leaving Blizzard to build something new, a big part of our goal is to carry the scene forward, but to provide hope. And I think there was a risk that if we left and we didn't let anybody know what we were doing, that people would assume, wow, well, things are quiet from Blizzard. And of course, the week before we announced the studio, Blizzard shared that new content development for Star 2 was going to end. Just like, we've all seen these threads or conversations around how RTS is dead, and it's not dead. Like, we know the numbers. There are an incredible number of players playing RTS, but there's that perception that kind of snowballs and turns negative. And so we didn't want that to happen. And we thought it was important for us to let everybody know that we absolutely intend to carry this genre forward and carry the scene forward. So that was part of it. But the other part of it was a shift. And sorry, did somebody want to jump in?
No,
No,
go,
go ahead.
keep going.
Okay. The other part of it was a shift that I saw happen while I was at Blizzard. And I think it was a really good shift. And I'm interested to hear what you guys think about this too. But there was sort of an ivory tower mentality that all game developers had, not just Blizzard. Like, this isn't a criticism aimed at anybody. It's just like the way we thought about it was, the game designers have the secret knowledge to make the game, and so they're just going to make all these decisions in a vacuum, and then they're going to announce the game when it's close to being shipped, like you were saying. And I think the truth is, the community spends so much time with this game that their relationship with the game in some ways is even deeper than the developers. And so to think that their feedback isn't necessary in building the game seems old-fashioned. Like, we've gotten to a point now, and we really tried to embrace this on StarCraft 2 by having annual community summits and just trying to have more communication with the community. But we've reached a point now where I think game developers in general, and definitely us as a team, really understand the value of having that input while we're in the development process. And so we're trying to your point, like, literally from the very beginning, engage in a dialogue and make sure that we're thinking about the right stuff as we build this, so we don't get to the end. And like, no matter what, there are going to be people who, for whatever reason, what we build doesn't resonate, or who think that decisions that we make along the way should be made differently. But at least there'll be a dialogue around this stuff, and we'll be making those decisions with input instead of just trying to take blind guesses. I don't know, Kevin and Tim.
Yeah, to just build on what Tim's saying, the RTS genre is incredibly important to us. It's near and dear to our hearts on a personal level, just in terms of what we care about, in terms of what we love playing. And if we were going to play this super safe, we probably would do what game development companies traditionally do, and probably what you listed. We would stay quiet. We would labor to build this game until we have something totally amazing to show, and then announce it right before going to, letting people play it and ship it. And that would benefit us potentially in that we'd keep things quiet, and any sort of zigzags during development wouldn't be public or anything like that. It's the traditional way, but that's not good for the genre as a whole. We really want to be developing transparently in a way that we can really help engage the whole community around RTS, and even shine some spotlights on other developers and really just help drive interest to the RTS category overall. And that's bigger than just the game that we're building. Obviously, we hope that most people who are fans of RTS games will like what we're building, but it's equally important to us that this category thrives. This is just something that we want to see flourish for, many, many, many years to come. And that's part of why we're engaging so openly at this point. The other part of it is that I think we've all seen, but definitely me personally, I've seen the best quality games and design decisions get made when they're made collaboratively, when it's not somebody who's just taking their task all the way to completion, and then we think of it like dropping a bomb. They get it all ready, and then ta-da, here it is. Here's this big reveal, this grand reveal to the rest of the dev team. And sometimes those grand reveals go sideways and they're not good, and then that person has wasted a lot of time and is really invested in what that is. And the best way to develop is to develop transparently, with communication, collaboratively, talking to people, getting their input along the way. And in this case, we're trying to extend that out to the community too, not just within the dev team. We want to engage and get thoughts and get ideas and pose topics and hear what people have to say, and really try to build this game out in full view of everyone, and make sure that the community has a chance to really help shape it. And that can't be done silently behind closed doors the way that most game companies do.
Yeah, speaking of avoiding the grand reveal, that was actually one of the pillars of design back at Blizzard. Avoid the grand reveal, which means you don't want to work on your little secret project or your little secret design for a month or two or a few years, and then don't show anyone, and then be like, ta-da, like here's this great thing that I've worked on. But it turns out it sucks because you never got feedback from anyone. And just in terms of where we have just some concrete examples about how our feedback process is going. Last month, we posed a topic, which was the topic of heroes, to both our Reddit community and our subreddit community, and a lot of various content creators in the Blizzard RTS space. And we got back a lot of great answers from a lot of figures, such as Grubby from Warcraft 3, for example. So a lot of those were new perspectives that we hadn't really thought of. Another example is Tim Campbell. He wasn't the most familiar to Twitter when we first announced the company, but he tweeted out, what are some ideas that you want in an RTS? And a lot of these ideas focused on accessibility. One of the ideas that I think we really latched onto came from Toby from Shopify. And his idea was to increase accessibility, take the idea of racing, that the concept that racing games have, where you can kind of see a ghost version of yourself when you're playing. And in that way, for example, when you're playing a game, you can kind of see what you previously did, or you load up a replay from like a pro player, and you see a ghost version of like he builds a barracks here, he builds a farm there, and you can try to follow it up and see how far behind or how far ahead you are compared to what this pro player or what you did in the past. And that's honestly an idea that no one here had ever thought of. And it's an idea that we're like, oh shit, that sounds amazing. We're going to try to do that if we can.
That sounds so cool, man. That's the coolest idea I've heard. Like that would be so helpful for new players. In Warcraft, we have such an influx of new players recently, with obviously the Twitch era of gaming and stuff like that. But in the last couple of years, especially, and there's so little resources for learning, and something like that just built into the game for new players would be such a cool thing. Because really, the old games especially are lacking that. But with newer games, I think new technology for, especially in a complicated genre like RTS, that's really, really important. So I think that's a great idea.
That concept that you just mentioned of learning, of helping new players kind of get up to speed and get into the game, is one of the areas that we're focused on. We believe fundamentally that a large audience is great for kind of all aspects of the RTS ecosystem, and large pools of players and viewers will really help fuel the pro scene. But we don't want to try to reach that larger pool of players by dumbing down the game or simplifying it. We really think that there are huge opportunities within RTS to really ramp people up and teach them the game in innovative ways that haven't really been done before that can help bridge that gap and bring them to appreciate the complexity of RTS gaming, and in a way that helps them acclimatize to it rather than just kind of getting hit in the face with a brick the first time they play this game and just leaving because it's too hard or too complicated. So like that is kind of a perfect point, and it's one of the reasons why that suggestion from the community directly resonated for us, because we're actively talking about it, and here comes this idea flying out of the community that none of us had considered before, and that's a perfect example of the sort of benefits that come from us being able to talk with the community about the game before it's all wrapped up and ready to ship.
Yeah, and just to what Tim said, just yesterday we were kind of talking about the idea of onboarding with missions. And again, Tim Campbell was lead campaign designer of Warcraft 3, and he was talking about a little mission that he made involving Thrall. When Thrall wakes up and gets a message from Medivh, and he goes out and finds the Medivh crow basically, and he was just talking about, like, we thought that mission was pretty good at the time. And onboarded people to the basics of Warcraft 3. And me coming from a StarCraft 1, a Warcraft 2 background, I thought, yeah, that was pretty awesome. But it turns out, like, what they found in testing is, like, yeah, like for newer players, like when you get into the game, your mouse just flies off the screen. It like, because you edge scroll all the way to the right, for example. And for new players, like, this isn't actually like a viable way to onboard people. We need to go more basic, and we need to figure out ways to onboard players who are perhaps not as familiar with the RTS genre.
It sounds like a very modern approach to, when I collect feedback, and I feel like it has been done, in certain scenes and games, but there's also been a few scenarios where from the community, like, the pressure is a lot. They're pressuring the game developer almost into releasing too early, and then then the game developer releases it, and then the people aren't happy or something because, like, it didn't go as well. So are you guys paying attention to all of this and then making sure that, like, you learn from this so that this doesn't repeat? Because I love the approach, but at the same time, it's like so new that it would be easy to make a mistake, and you're already taking on the greatest of challenges, which is making a good RTS.
Yeah, good question. I mean, we're definitely been, for example, watching what's going on with Cyberpunk right now. I think, we try to be circumspect and learn from our past experiences and learn from what's going on in games. So I'm sure we'll find completely new mistakes to make, but we're trying our best. And
Yeah, that's the fun of game development, right?
Yeah.
You get to try so many things, and kind of pushing boundaries leads to mistakes, but those mistakes are often good in that you learn from them and you can apply that towards making even better results in the future. But yeah, we're a new company. This is our total and complete focus, and we're viewing this as a game that we're building to be on the market for many, many, many years. This is a decade plus long game that we want to be on the market and be able to really fuel a strong continuation of the RTS community and the Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2 communities. So from our perspective, I love getting feedback from the community, but we're absolutely then kind of sifting that. We're looking at what we can do with priorities so that we don't rush a game to market or anything like that. It's really important to us that what we ship is really sound, really solid, and is something that can stand the test of time.
when Tim says decade plus, that means we want people to play it for a decade plus. Not
Yes,
that it's
sorry,
gonna take
not
us.
the dev cycle.
Yeah, just sorry, go ahead, Remo.
Yeah, okay. If I may, like, from the general community, and that is the gaming community, lots of voices are heard of how the RTS genre is limited, not only in its ideas, but also in its player base, right? So I wonder if you guys have any, in quotes, revolutionary ideas, or at least innovative ideas as to what unexplored potential RTS has that hasn't been explored so far. Whether it be in-game systems or out-of-game potential.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to preface this just by saying I get this a lot in terms of perceptually people think RTS is really small or really niche. And I mean, the truth is even today, over 10 years after its launch, StarCraft 2 has millions of players. Warcraft 3, with the community in China and the community in the rest of the world, also in the millions. I hear Age of Empires also in the millions. StarCraft 1, Brood War, particularly in Korea, but again, in the rest of the world, like very impressive numbers there. So it's not as small a community as we think it is. It's already pretty sizable. And yes, Battle Royale and MOBA, and there are bigger communities out there, like no doubt. So I think the heart of what you're asking is, are there things that haven't been done before in RTS that can cause it to reach those numbers? And I would maybe look at other genres in terms of a template, and here's why. In going from Dota to League of Legends, that was like transformational in terms of how many players were in that scene. The original Dota, it had a strong core community, and I don't know what the numbers were, but perhaps in the single-digit millions. League of Legends at some point, Riot said they hit 100 million monthly active users. So transformational, like orders of magnitude more players between Dota and League of Legends. But if you ask that same question that you just asked about what is it that Riot changed that caused that massive increase, it's hard to point to one thing. It's actually kind of a collection of user quality of life experiences, user experience in general, that got better between Dota and League of Legends. And I'm sure there are people going like, it's not better. Dota was like, totally, I get it. There's still things that you can point to from the original, but the reality is League of Legends was orders of magnitude more successful. So definitely worth thinking about, is there one thing that we should change that would be transformational? But our suspicion and other genres, you go from, I don't know, EverQuest to World of Warcraft, or you go from I don't know, Magic Online to Hearthstone. Like there are all these examples where genres have broken out, where it's not just one thing that you can point to. But that said, maybe I'll pass the torch to Kevin and Tim, and you guys can.
Yeah, I think there's a ton that could be done to grow RTS, grow the audience, and to explore new gameplay spaces within RTS. I think there's a ton. I don't think there's one lever to pull, one switch to flip, though, that will transform the whole genre. I mean, Blizzard's a fantastic company full of fantastic developers, and there are a lot of smart people who have been working in this genre over the years that we have incredible respect for. And if there was one simple switch to flip, they would have flipped it. For us, I think that we look at this, and getting back to Tim's kind of, it's going to be a collection of different decisions. I think that's the right way to think about it. We have kind of four main pillars in terms of the way that the game is played. We think about it in terms of there's campaign, there's cooperative, there's competitive, and then there's custom games and user-generated content. And we kind of zoom into each one of those. And when you do that, there are fundamentally different things that we could do that would really improve the quality of life for players, the way they experience the game, and the way that this game is shared and communicated between players. So, like campaign, for example, traditionally it's a single player campaign leads into is a way of teaching the game for to get players to go to multiplayer, and like what's kind of apparent, I think, to everyone, people who've even played the campaigns and tried to make that jump, is that's not a good way of equipping players to play multiplayer. It teaches the wrong skills. It's a massive jump from where the campaign leaves off into competitive multiplayer, and we can do better by not just following the traditional framework, by fundamentally looking at this and saying, how can we approach campaign to serve its own purposes better? And looking at cooperative as a way to kind of bridge that gap between campaign and competitive. Can we get people to play who traditionally play campaigns? Can we get them to play on a team? in that environment and learn to communicate and cooperate with players. And then from there, can they switch into competitive? And at each one of those stages, there's a different thing we can do to approach it differently and to make it easier for people to play and make it more fun for people to play. And so what we're trying to do is really look at this space and just rethink some of the fundamental assumptions that have kind of crept in and become solidified over time for no reason other than it's just traditionally the way that the genre has been developed.
Yeah, and I think one of those assumptions is the idea, especially for an audience which is yours, Todd, that RTS is all about esports. And one of the big successes, as Tim M alluded to earlier, in StarCraft 2 was the idea of co-op. Originally, the people who made co-op thought, maybe you'd play 10 hours with each co-op hero. But in reality, players played up to hundreds of hours with each commander. And the success was so massive that the team actually had to pivot their entire production strategy around supporting these new co-op commanders that no one ever thought would be this successful. And I really think co-op commanders is kind of a silent success of StarCraft 2. Again, when players from the esports scene traditionally think about RTS, they think about how many concurrent players are playing the ladder, how many players or how many viewers do you have on each of your esports streams. But what we found in StarCraft 2 is that actually the most played mode of StarCraft 2 was cooperative, and we see huge opportunity there in order to create a cooperative game mode from the ground up in order to support an RTS.
Okay.
If I might just intersect right there, I'm sorry, Todd. I'm gonna hijack that for just a second. We all know how successful co-op is in StarCraft, and that was, as you said, a big surprise. How was that viewed in the StarCraft team, and for more relevant reasons, how is that viewed for Frost Giant? Is co-op seen as a end goal, as in this is the user experience that we want to have them enjoying for their predominant stay and experience, or is it a transitional experience that is supposed to lead them into the multiplayer realm? Because that's very different philosophies, right? And I suppose it's different to dissect, but what is the purpose of co-op in the end?
Tim C alluded earlier, but where traditionally I think there was a philosophy of trying to transition players from mode to mode, I think we've come to think about it more as there are players who just gravitate naturally to a particular type of play. And certainly competitive players will play a campaign or they'll spend time in co-op, but like their love is competing. And so co-op, it's just not going to be the pillar mode for that type of player. Hopefully, they're going to enjoy it, and even for Star 2, I think competitive players sometimes like to take a break between laddering and decompress or have a social experience where they bring a friend in, so they'll play it, but it's just not their primary mode. But what we found, it's almost like football. I mean, a lot of people love to watch pro football. But not a lot of people actually go out and do full contact tackle on their lunch break. Like it just, there's an audience that follows competitive esports that isn't necessarily feeling like they're capable of executing at the level of top players. And those players tend to play other modes. They tend to play campaign. They tend to play co-op. And it's super important. Like competitive is such an important part of the identity of real-time strategy. There's no way that we're going to underserve competitive as a mode. But we're recognizing that actually the majority of players in these games play non-competitive modes. And so it's really important that we provide something for them that's compelling, that they enjoy. It's flag football. It's, they're not going to get beat up. And they can still have that pro esports experience as a viewer, and obviously the players who seek that level of competition, we've still got that mode for them, but we're understanding that it's actually a smaller audience, super important audience, but it is smaller.
I'm under the impression that you guys are gonna have to try and find the right balance for everything. So like for example, on one side you got co-op and campaign, and on the other one you got multiplayer. So to try and like work on both. And then there's always the discussion of hardcore to casual friendly, which is probably one of the trickiest things as well. So am I right in making this assumption that you guys are going to be looking every time to find the right balance between that, or are you already maybe leaning towards one or the other on like any of these subjects?
Yeah, I think it is a balance, like you're saying, and as we go through development, there's gonna be thousands and thousands of decisions that we're making, and each one of those decisions we have to look through a lens that's not just singular, right? It's a lens that factors in these different considerations, different modes, different types of players, and what will strike the right balance for the game, and that's incredibly important. So, with co-op, for example, like Tim's saying, we're not going to develop co-op to the detriment of competitive. We want competitive to thrive. It is very, very fundamentally important to us. But we also are acknowledging that cooperative is really important. It's been a massive success in SE2, and it was added after launch for SE2. It was late to the game. And we think that it could be integrated better with the other modes and lead to a better overall player experience if we can bring that into the core concept of what this game is that we're building, rather than leaving it to be something after the fact that's just kind of patched in and standalone. And so, yeah, we're looking at all these different decisions, and that goes from unit design to interface design, as we're looking at how you interact with casting abilities or producing troops or harvesting resources, and we have to be constantly weighing all those things. It's just one of the blessings and curses of the RTS genre, is that you have these different player bases who play different modes, and you need to balance considerations for all of them at the same time.
Yeah, one of our core philosophies when making this game is that we want to lower the skill floor without lowering the skill ceiling. We want players to be able to get into the game a lot easier, but we don't want like top level of play to be as affected as much. One of the ideas that we have for this, for example, is the idea of autocasting. Now, fans of Warcraft 3 will be very familiar with this idea of autocasting, but fans of StarCraft 2, for fans of StarCraft 2, this was kind of like a new idea for them in many ways. Because yes, you do have like autocast heal, autocast restore, but not many examples out there for autocasting. So just for the example in Warcraft 3, the idea of sorceresses, they slow, they autocast slow. So for a new player, you can just make a sorceress and they'll just slow everything in your opponent's army. But for a more experienced player, you don't necessarily want to autocast slow all the time. For example, you want to conserve your mana against creeps. And also, there's a lot of situations in which the autocast system is not as intelligent as you might want it to be. Autocast in Warcraft 3 only casts when your opponents are attacking you. But if you're, for example, chasing a hero or a unit that's running away, you have to manually cast it. So that's just an example of a system that we could incorporate into our game, where newer players can get a lot of value out of slow. They don't have to manually target every individual unit. But for the more experienced players, there's a lot of little micro tricks you can do with this very simple ability by turning autocast on and off, or by manually casting the ability.
So if I might jump in right here, when we're talking about new player experiences and I suppose positive experiences, one thing that I always felt like is a problem with RTS is showing to the new player that they have done something significant and something positive and reinforcing them positively. In games like Dota and Counter-Strike, it's easy. In Counter-Strike, you get a headshot, you get a kill, and then you immediately feel like you have done something well. In Dota, you build a new item and you feel immediately stronger, and then you hit some creeps, you get more gold, whatever it might be, right? Like there's this clear progression. Like if you're a noob, there's this and that stuff you can do. Even in Dota, there's like these item builds you can follow. And there's a clear trajectory as to what you are supposed to do, and you follow that, and you get strong and you feel better. Whereas in RTS, at least my experience, it is a lot less clear. I remember when I started playing RTS, and I started out playing as Undead, and I was I started listening to some audio guys or whatever, and they started talking about whatever. There's 4 different matchups, and you're supposed to do this and that for the different matchups. And they're like, oh my god, this is way too much. So I just started playing one matchup or one opening rather for every single matchup. So it felt like to me, and from what I've heard from other people as well, that there's a lot of knowledge to overcome and a lot of punishment to endure until you finally feel rewarded. I hope that doesn't sound too negative, but I feel like that is somewhat reflective of the RTS genre. There seems to be so many things you have to know and be able to execute before you have that moment of gratification of actually feeling like you did something right and enjoying the game truly. Whereas other genres have much easier reward mechanisms. How does Frost Giant intend to make those rewards more easily accessible for newer players whilst also not diminishing the depth of the game?
I I think that's a fantastic question, by the way, and it's one that we've actually been talking a lot about. So I'll just kind of tee it up broadly, and then if Tim or Kevin want to dive into that more, go for it. One of the things that we've done, one of the exercises we've done as a team since starting, is to really deconstruct the negative experiences of playing an RTS for a first-time player. Like, what is it about RTS games that sucks for new players? What is frustrating? What makes you just want to walk away from the genre? Feeling overwhelmed or feeling confused or whatever it is. We listed out identified a bunch of emotions, a bunch of things which kind of generated those emotions, and then started working backwards to deconstruct what fed into this being a frustrating experience compared to other genres, which may have smoother ways of getting players in. And once we break it all down and we look at what kind of the molecular causes are for why I'm frustrated with this new game, um, it becomes clear what maybe some of the solutions could be. And so we've gone through the deconstruction process. We feel like we're kind of understanding the landscape, and we're in the middle of talking about how we can actually address those things and specifically to the point you're talking about, so that you have these moments of positive emotion when you're playing the game and learning it, as opposed to just these moments of wanting to just stand up and walk away from the computer.
Yeah, there's a distinction to make. I think so. There's like two pieces here. I'm a new player. I've never played RTS before, and I'm just reaching some basic level of proficiency where I'm comfortable in the game. And then there's this next level of going from proficiency to mastery. And so I think those are like two discrete phases on a player's journey into a new genre. And so you might be asking about the second, like how do we get them from proficient to mastery? And there's kind of a separate set of considerations there. But I saw the head shake, so if it's the first part of I'm brand new, how do I get in? Here's one of the things that came out of the deconstruction that Tim C just mentioned. Almost every other genre you play, as soon as you start that game, the first thing you see is the representation of you as a player in that world. It's your character, and maybe it's your arms and your gun if it's a first-person shooter. Maybe it's the character itself if it's a third-person or a platformer or whatever. You start an RTS, immediately you're disoriented. There's like this top-down view. It's not evident who you are in the world. You might have some structures, a collection of units, and all this user interface that looks very intimidating. Right away you're disoriented, and so your first experience is one of feeling kind of overwhelmed, and so there's a lot wrapped up into that. But we just had this conversation with the community around hero-based games in RTS. One of the benefits of a hero-based RTS is that new players coming in actually feel more comfortable because right away there is a representation of them in the world. And yeah, the way the character moves isn't WASD, and there's differences. But at least there's this familiar point to work with. Interface, how overwhelming interface can be. Like there are so many other components of that we can deconstruct to think about how we make that first on-ramp better. And to Tim's earlier point, like making the on-ramp better doesn't mean that we fundamentally change the way the game works for experienced players. We still want experienced players to have all of the things that they love about the game be there. But I think there's just a ton that we can do to make those early experiences less overwhelming. I don't know, Kevin, anything to add to that?
Yeah, and to Tim's point about onboarding, yeah, we already talked about a lot of RTS campaigns or a lot of RTSs try to onboard players by teaching players how to move the units around or how to build units. And I think there definitely can be improvements made to that. But one thing that no RTS really does is try to teach player the meta build orders, for example. And that's where the idea of the ghost tool that we talked about earlier comes in. If players can download a game where the game actually shows you when and where to build these buildings and what units to build, I think that could be a big step up to teaching players how to play within the meta of our future game. Another idea we had is to build not only a sandbox mode in our game, like a unit tester, but also a micro arena into our game. And these are things that, the community has done, but if we do it ourselves, it's built into like the base of the game that players will be able to engage with directly when they get into the game without having to like download the map or search for it. And also, this is something that we can easily tweak. Like, for example, if the meta shifts from you start with like 4 grunts to you build like 5 trolls, we can easily switch out the units in our like micro arena game, for example, to allow you to test your micro with these common units and to familiarize players with those units. So yeah, just a lot of small meta things that we can do within our game to help get players into competitive modes.
What do you guys think of something like, I've heard people talk about in the scene and Reddit and stuff like that, like achievements based for stuff? Because as somebody, you're talking about two sides, the hardcore competitive people and then the casual, people that want to play co-op with their brothers, stuff like that. So for like the co-op side of things, from a competitive player's standpoint, someone who views it through a competitive lens, I always want to see the end goal of something. I don't want to just be like, oh, once I finish this last mission, I'm done. Like, for instance, like a good connection would be like GoldenEye for N64. People still play that because there was like a set time. You have to get 55 seconds to unlock the cheat on this mission, right? So like as someone who's competitive, I can play that through the lens of I have an end goal that can sort of go. I can always get that time lower and lower. So what do you guys think of sort of like achievements within game, within co-op to get the hardcore people over, and within sort of 1v1 more competitive stuff to get the less competitive people over, but with still that sense of achievement?
I love that idea. I'm a huge fan of achievements that aren't just racked up through normal play. Not just, hey, play 25 sections. Achievement unlocked, right?
Yeah.
I love achievements that can encourage you to play either a different way or to encourage you to optimize how you play to really become so efficient that you can clear a certain marker, whether it's time or score or whatever else. That sort of implementation of achievements that gives you like something discrete to like really aim at and work towards while you're playing the game and having fun, like that just adds that extra layer of for me of just something to strive for as a player. I love that sort of system.
Okay, so I got a question about just in general the economy system that you plan on using. If, like, again, I don't know if you guys have anything that you can even talk about right now because we're like very early in the development of the game, but there is multiple options in terms of economy. How many different resources? I think, like, personally, I feel like 1 is probably unlikely. Then 3, like, is it too much? Like 2 seems like the perfect number so far, but I'm sure you guys are studying every possibility. And also, the units countering each other, the units type and armor and all of that, like, is that something that you guys might be leaning towards? And also, how many races? So I know it's a lot, but if there's anything you guys can say about this, yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
You go, Tim. I was just going to say, like, we haven't made hard decisions on this stuff. You're totally right. We are studying all this. Even within the team, I think we're still debating. Resources, even like how resources work. There's a lot of different variations across other RTS games and how they've approached this. But I don't know, Kevin or Tim, if you want to at least talk about the conversations we've been having. So
Yeah,
far.
I'll start off and then Kevin, by all means, jump in. Like Tim was saying, we don't have hard decisions yet, but there's active conversations. So we've talked about deconstructing other aspects of the games. We've actively deconstructed the Blizzard resources systems, looking at other RTSs and their resource systems, and even things which aren't true resources like corpses for undead. Like it's kind of a pseudo half resource for a particular race. We're looking at those things, and and this is an active point where we're talking about. So I wish I could give you a straight answer on that, but we just aren't there yet. What we probably will do, what we're expecting to do, is to implement a bunch of different resource schemes. We will probably implement at least the traditional Blizzard schemes, if not other RTS schemes, and really look at how we can take aspects of different things and build them into something new. We're not simply going to copy Warcraft 3's resource scheme or Starcraft 2's resource scheme. We're building our own, but it will be definitely influenced by what has come before and what we think leads to the best gameplay.
Yeah, I alluded to some of this earlier, but one thing we really like about Warcraft 3's resource scheme is that different races interact with them in different ways. For example, Wisps don't have to consume trees. Like ghouls are a combat unit, and they can harvest resources, and they harvest resources at a much faster rate than the other workers. And just the idea of trees, we like the idea that they're not only a resource, but also that they are terrain that you can bypass. Just in the number of ways you can interact with trees, with Keeper, with Mountain Giants, with Ancients of War, with siege weapons, with Flame Strike, for example. The possibilities are like they make trees not only a resource, but something grander than that. At the same time, I do think there are problems with trees. I think they are a little unlimited in many ways, especially if you grab a shredder. And they almost feel like a non-resource at some certain stages of the game. Starcraft, in that with Vespian gas, you can kind of look at how many bases your opponent is on. You can kind of count the amount of gas that his units are using, and then you can think, oh, he definitely doesn't have any more tech beyond those units because he wouldn't have the amount of Vespian gas. I think that's something that that Warcraft 3 is lacking with wood, in that wood is essentially unlimited in late game.
And what about races? I heard on the Pylon show that you guys might do one race. Like, that's for the balance. What's up with that?
I think that was facetious more than anything else. But there's a debate right now. There's certain elegance to the three sort of asymmetric races in StarCraft 2, StarCraft 1. There's also just a sense of variety, I think, in the Warcraft approach. And Tim can talk to, I think the original vision was even grander than the current number of races in Warcraft 3. So, we're still very much debating the merits internally. I don't know, Tim and Kevin, if you want to.
Wait, was there almost a Naga race or something? Or was there almost an Expo race?
Yeah, there were definitely ideas. There were definitely ideas for races before that got pruned out to get down to the 4 that shipped, for sure. And some of those ideas then resurfaced through the campaign in sub races for Blood Elves or Naga or whatever else. But yeah, the 4 that shipped were awesome and fantastic, but there were also some really cool ideas that were cut too that could have been really interesting in their own right. So yeah, this is something that we actively talk about. I mean, on one hand, it's a creative topic. Can we come up with races and tech trees that are really interesting and fun to play with, and are distinctive? But then it's also a technical challenge too, in terms of balance and all the complexity that comes along with that. And it's really important to us as a game that will have a big competitive component to it, that we are not just fast and loose with the balance. We have to make sure that this game is tuned, that the races can stand toe to toe with each other, and be within a narrow power band of each other. And so it's an active conversation. We're definitely not doing 15 races. We can confirm that we're not doing anything crazy like that, and not one race. Also, I can confirm that that's not the case. But other than that, this is also something we'd love to hear from the community on. One of our, I believe our current topic, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but I believe our current topic is asymmetry. And that touches on both the asymmetry around the economy that we were just talking about, and also the asymmetry between races, and the degree to which asymmetry is worked into the gameplay. I think both StarCraft 2 and Warcraft 3 have good degrees of asymmetry, but they emphasize the asymmetry in different aspects of the game. Like the economic asymmetry in War 3 is, I think, further along, pushed further than it is in SC2. But that, you could look at how the tech trees work in War 3, and how all the main buildings go through 3 stages, and they share a lot more similarity there than maybe the tech trees in SC2 do. And so it's interesting how the games have pushed in different ways, and we're trying to really process that and figure out to what degree do we want the number of races and the degree of asymmetry between those races to be core in the game. And so that's something that's definitely open. We want to hear from the community and hear thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think in a vacuum, everyone wants more races, as many races as possible. And really, the only limiting factor there, from the perspective of the community, is balance. And when that discussion comes to a head, players reference generally Warcraft 3 versus StarCraft 2. Warcraft 3 has 4 races, and StarCraft 2 has 3 races. And I think many would argue that Warcraft 3 has never been balanced as well as StarCraft 2 because of the number of races. And while I do think that 4 races adds an extreme degree of complexity to balancing, I also believe that you kind of have to look into the history of the games, in that StarCraft 2 was supported by a team that was balancing throughout its 10-year history, whereas Warcraft 3, I felt like the patch cadence was much slower. And after a certain point, there were no balance patches. So we had this long era of undead versus orc, where I think like orcs had like an 80% win rate among the top players.
Good times.
Well, also the games are a product of their times too, right?
Yeah.
SC2 is a much more modern game than War 3 was. And if you look back at when War 3 was released, well, that's practically the Stone Age in terms of service-based games and the data that comes along with it. And we were balancing according to our gut instincts and Excel spreadsheets and our own internal pool of plays, and it wasn't like we had tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of games flooding into our computers, enlightening us with all of the data and the insights from what's OP and what's not. We were definitely limited in how we could approach that. So definitely part of the challenge. I mean, adding races obviously adds to the complexity and the challenge of balancing it, but they're also, between those two games, a big consideration is just the modernness of SC2 versus War 3 and the availability of data.
Yeah, exactly.
The sole primary challenge, in my opinion, for RTS seems to be to be able to get new players to understand the game and be able to play the game, as far as I see it. And for me personally, it feels like coaching might be a good way to bridge that gap and to enable newer players to reach that next level. Is coaching a factor for Frost Giant games, and what other systems, if any, do you guys envision and have planned to make that transition more easy and more streamlined for new players?
You go, Tim.
Sorry, I saw you were about to talk, so I paused. So I can't speak to coaching specifically. Again, just by nature of us being early and still a lot of things being in the formative stage. But we were just talking the other day about the value of having some system or mechanism to connect new players with experienced players who can kind of take them under their wing, show them the ropes, and help them transition into feeling comfortable in multiplayer. And that system, I could definitely see a world where that's expressed as some sort of in-game, in UI way of supporting coaching. I could see it being expressed in different ways. We're gonna have to figure out what the right way to manifest that is, but definitely I think one of the challenges of totally new players coming into competitive is that they just don't know the right way to play, and they don't want to lose horribly and be embarrassed and have a frustrating time. And we can try in a lot of different ways in game to help bridge that on our side. But I think ultimately that's still going to be a better but imperfect way of doing it. And I think that the best way is always going to be having that experienced person being able to talk to you and help you learn the ropes. And so finding a way to pair players up like that and encourage it and reward it, I think would definitely be a good thing for us to do.
I think one of the use cases that emerged, not one that we planned for with co-op in Star 2, was that experienced players would invite their friends to come try RTS in a cooperative setting with them. And, you know, they're kind of carrying the mission while the other player gets some gameplay and they're sandboxing and just experiencing what RTS is all about. But so that was the use case where we didn't really anticipate it. We didn't really design for it, but I think we can put a lot more thought into that. I love the idea of coaching. And as Tim C mentioned, this is something that came up recently on our side. Like, I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to put systems around that that encourage it and cultivate it. But it's such a broad surface area to this question of how do we get new players into RTS more successfully. So I think this is one component of it. But you know, spoon feeding the tech tree, the ghosting system, like there are probably dozens, if not hundreds, of ideas that we've got here to try to make this better. So as we get further along, we're going to be trying this stuff. Like, we're going to actually be prototyping it and experimenting and seeing what feels like it has the most promise here. But this is a really big area of focus for us, because part of what we want to do with this game is what happened with League of Legends. Like, we want to see real-time strategy become a massive genre in the cultural conversation, as much as the battle royales, as much as MOBAs. So, yeah.
If I'm sorry, if that is a little how realistic do you feel that proposition is? Because if you listen to anybody in the game industry, they say that first of all, RTS has lived its day, and secondly, maybe there is a future for it. But if there is a future for it, then it is under the shadow of other genres. But the way you stated it is, you know, we are aiming for higher things. So, and you compared it just a second ago to Battle Royale. You really feel that RTS has the potential to be the biggest genre of video games again?
I think this stuff is cyclical, and games have their moments. Like, Battle Royale's not going to stay as big as it is right now. Other stuff is already coming along that's distracting players in other directions. So, you know, I don't think any one genre is going to stay at the top of the pyramid, but I absolutely think RTS will have another day in the sun. And I go back to the Dota example. I mean, you look at what was a mod to Warcraft 3 that was pretty obscure in its time. I mean, MOBA became a very mainstream genre, and for a good period there, MOBA was the thing that had its moment in the sun. I think that's super validating. Like, that's not a casual genre. It's definitely a core genre. I don't think RTS is markedly different. In a lot of ways, it's MOBA with more depth. You know, it's adding resource management and an army. So I 100% believe we can do that, and we are committed to make that happen at Frost Giant.
Actually, I got a follow-up question then. Sorry, Tim. Just
No, go ahead.
If you look at all these games that are top esports currently, they're all team games. So would making sure that the game both is really good in solo and in team be a priority then? Because we don't really know like whether if solo or 2-on-2 would be like the most popular, for example. Usually on RTS, it's always about 1v1. And it does feel like there's been that unexplored potential. Like in Warcraft 3, 2-on-2 is maybe one of the best, maybe the best game in the world for 2-on-2 when I look at it. Whereas like in StarCraft, not so much. Like 2-on-2 is almost not played at all in comparison. In my opinion, it's not that great. So would that be something that you guys also focused on to make sure that as a team, the game is also like very, very good, I guess?
And if I could add to that a little bit, sorry, if just your philosophy on top of that question on just balancing the game, because if you're focusing on 1v1, then 2v2 becomes imbalanced. If you're focusing on 2v2, 1v1 becomes imbalanced because you have mixture of races. So if you could just touch on that as well.
Yeah, I love both these questions. So we have made these same observations, and this is going to be one of the future topics that we turn around and pose to the community, because I believe in what Carson just said. I think Star 2's focus on 1v1, caused less effort to go towards balancing 2v2, and we see that in the quality of the experience, like Todd referenced. So I think the choice we make here is really important. Certainly, looking at the popularity of team games and esports right now makes us wonder, should that be the thing we focus on first? But at the same time, the purity of 1v1 competition feels like it's an essential part of the character of real-time strategy, and I think it could be argued that it's one of the things that kept real-time strategy relevant all this time. So it's a really tough decision, and I don't think we have the right answer, but we make the same observation, and we talk a lot about how are we going to make this decision. And I think the answer to that question of how we're going to make this decision is by making this a future topic to talk about in the community, just like we did with Heroes. And we're really interested in the future to get these perspectives, but we got to get past the asymmetry discussion that we've got going on right now before we tackle that one.
You talked about, or you mentioned quite a few times that you're getting feedback from the community. What's the best place for people to give their feedback or suggestions to you? Would that be Reddit or somewhere else?
Yeah, the Frost Giant subreddit, and I'll give some context here. We're still a really small team, and we'll grow over time for sure. But for right now, we're just too small to interact in the way that we'd like to in a Discord channel. So I think in the future, at some point, Discord will become a hub. But for right now, the Frost Giant subreddit is the best place for this stuff.
Yeah, and if I can add about team games, just personally, Todd, I'm a big fan of team games, both in StarCraft and Warcraft. And just even going back to my starting days with RTS, again, I referenced that Big Game Hunters was the main mode that I played in Brood War. And from my perception back in the day, it seemed like that was the most popular mode, like Bloodbath, Big Game Hunters. These are all big team-based maps rather than hardcore 1v1. At least those are the games that I saw in US East and US West. And I do think StarCraft 2 focusing so much on 1v1 was kind of a missed opportunity. I always talk about there's a lot of things that were extremely imbalanced in the beginning of StarCraft 2 in terms of 2v2. There's this meme of cars and dogs, in which in the beginning of StarCraft 2, I felt like Hellions and Zerglings could not be beat by Protoss at all, until, for example, the Mothership Core came in, until the Adept came in. But these were units that, and map design got better, of course, but these were units that came in the first expansion of StarCraft 2. That's 3 years down the road, in which 2v2 was completely, like, in many ways unviable. And the scene had died off by then, and players didn't try to come back. On the opposite end, you have Warcraft 3, which there's a lot of balance changes made specifically for 2v2. For example, damage caps on Blizzard, all the Shockwave, all the big AoEs. I don't know, like Todd, you seem a little confused, but there's like these damage caps that were in the dev notes. They said these are specifically for the free for all and team communities, in which you can't do over like a maximum of like X damage with these spells. And I also remember there was a specific balance change that, I want to hear your Warcraft 3 guys' opinions on this. I always felt there was a specific balance change made for 2v2 that greatly affected 1v1, which was there was a time in 2v2 where Farseer Keeper was deemed to be imbalanced in 2v2.
It's still,
and they actually, here's the thing, they nerfed the Farseer by increasing the experience that Wolves gave. And I felt like partly because of that, Wolves or Farseer fell off in the 1v1 competitive meta. And that was partially the reason for why Blade Master got really strong. And for one of the big balance changes, or one of the balance changes that was made recently, was that change got reverted, and that Farseer wolves gave the same amount of XP as they did like 10 years ago. Like that's just an example of like if we balance for 2v2, that's how it can kind of trickle down to 1v1. But I am curious on your guys' thoughts again about like whether that had a big effect on the Blade Master domination.
I think that was a pretty big impact, and it's a really negative one specifically for Orc because everyone, I think Blade Master, although I'm an Orc player, I love Blade Master. Everybody hates Blade Master that's not an Orc player because you come out of Windwalk and you just steal the creeps and
No.
everything. So the
I
fact.
appreciate how hard it is.
Okay, thank you, Remo.
Shout out to Hitman. You can do it. You know, all the other orcs. Whenever I play an orc in Europe and he's playing Blade Master, his name's not Hitman, I'm like, I make one Banshee. There we go.
Exactly.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, but the fact that it sort of forced people to go more into Blade Master and more into like, you know, just one single hero, whereas a lot of other races have other options with the exception of Undead until recently, stuff like that. I think that's always a bad thing if you're forcing the people in 1v1 to do more boring standard strategies. It was just Raider, Walker, Kodo, 4 Grunts, Blade Master, Shadowhunter for like 10 years pretty much. So anything in 2v2 which has such a variety of strategies already, forcing 1v1 to be just one strat for 10 years, I think is definitely a bad thing. I didn't know that change was for 2v2 at all though, so that's really interesting. But it definitely did affect 1v1. Yeah, absolutely.
Poor Orc, poor Rotterdam specifically.
Yeah, Rotterdam for sure.
I remember talking to him at a StarCraft 2 event a long time ago, and I told him, hey, you know, they like buff wolves. And he's like, I should go back to Warcraft. I would have been the best player in the world.
Actually, the current meta of human against orc is what he used to do. It's like run shaman, so he would be pretty good. Yeah, for myself,
Also,
I think.
Please go ahead.
I always thought that they switched to Blade Master because they realized how broken and imbalanced it was. So yeah.
See, that's what I'm talking about. Everyone hates Blade Master.
I know another change they made is they changed the consumable items to permanent items. So like circlets and claws got more common.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. About the units type and different type of attacks countering each other. So in Warcraft 3, we have like magic damage, piercing, melee. And then you have types of armor that are affected by this. So you have heavy and all that stuff. I feel like in Warcraft 3, there's more emphasis on this than in, for example, Brood War, where it just feels like you build an overall best unit composition depending on the matchup. And it also reflects in your build order. But in Warcraft 3, there is clearly stuff that's supposed to counter one another a lot more. And in StarCraft 2 probably as well. Is that something that's also very important for you guys to try and have that kind of like, you know, tech tree or like rock, paper, scissors where units counter one another? Or if that's like secondary and maybe you just want to focus on making the best games possible first and then focus on that later maybe if there is no place for it?
Yeah, this kind of gets into the hard counters versus soft counters debate that sometimes happens. And I don't know, I would pass this one to Tim and Kevin to share their thoughts.
I think we don't lead with hard or soft counters. I think when we're approaching designing races, we're trying to figure out what the play style is, what mechanics we want to support that play style so that you get the overall feel of the race. Is this a race that can fast expand? Is it more rushy? Is it higher unit count? Is it like what is distinctive about this race? And then as we nail that, as that solidifies and you can play it and it's fun and you can get a sense for how it just behaves as a just isolated, is this a fun experience? Then that's when we can kind of look between the races and start saying, hey, what's the right way to get these to interact then? And then expand that out to others. And some places may need a little bit harder counters than others. I don't yet know how many armor types or weapon types we're going to have or anything like that, but some of that also may depend on number of races and how much asymmetry we pursue for. But it's definitely something which is on the table that we could experiment with for sure.
Yeah, I want to speak less about what our game will have in terms of our armor types and talk about how armor types worked in previous games. So, for example, one of the things I talked about earlier that I liked about Warcraft 3 is that burrows are more susceptible to damage because they have medium armor, as opposed to as opposed to heavy. Sorry, I got it's the Reign of Chaos medium armor. Heavy armor instead of fortified, and I think that's really cool. However, one downside I feel of Warcraft 3 armor types is that there are so many, and there are so many damage types, and you have to memorize this huge chart of how much everything does against one another, and I feel like that's really inaccessible. And then we look at the StarCraft 2 system, and that is a lot more simple. But I feel like one of the disadvantages that has is we ran into a situation recently where nothing did bonus damage to banelings really, and so like it was hard to like point something to say, oh, we need this to counter banelings. So I think we're at a point where we're taking a look at the pluses and minuses of each weapon and armor system and deciding like how do we take the best from all the worlds and incorporate them into our game.
Isn't that like a pretty straightforward way of allowing easy to learn, hard to master sort of scenarios where you incorporate a damage and armor system that is always part of your game, but not necessarily visible to everyone. But it doesn't have to be visible to everyone. The person who picks it up for the first 3 hours can still play and make their Marines versus Zerglings, and they don't have to know their, damage types and stuff. Isn't that also like the complexity that goes into that? Isn't that also something that appreciates to be valued?
So I will say, I'll take this one. I think anecdotally, I think Company of Heroes and the Company of Heroes franchise is one of my favorite RTSs outside of Blizzard RTSs of all time. But one change they made from Company of Heroes 1 to 2 is that they removed like the icon telling you how much damage units do against each other. So it no longer says this unit does like 10 damage versus infantry and like 20 damage versus tanks, for instance. And that, as like a seasoned RTS player, made me so furious because I didn't know how to counter my opponents. I didn't know like do I make like the rocket launcher versus this infantry guy, or do I make like the laser gun against this guy? And not only is it not surfaced in the game, it's not surfaced online either in an official form. You had to like basically download this Excel sheet that a fan made in order to get that information. So I feel like that's one downside of not showing your players how much damage units do against each other.
But yeah, to your question, I think of is this a part of mastery? That's good. I think there's definitely some good elements there. We want people to be able to improve in their understanding of unit relationships and how they can get more efficient in their unit comps to counter other unit comps. And that is, I think, like what you're talking about, I think it's a good element of how players can gradually learn to be incrementally better and better and better at the game and how they play. So the questions to us would be how we would express it, because like Kevin was saying earlier, at some point it gets to be too many columns and rows to really be able to understand those relationships. It just turns to noise. So how complex and how do we present that? I think those are big open questions that we need to figure out. But aspirationally, the goal of letting players get more and more efficient with their understanding of how units interact with each other is absolutely a good thing.
To touch on that point a little bit, I was wondering because we're Warcraft players here. We play a very old game, and there's something beautiful about these old games. In Brood War, it's like the Dragoons. They run all over the place. If you right click somewhere, they run all the way around the map. So it's sort of taming that AI from 20 years ago. That's almost a beautiful thing with it. And in Warcraft, there's things like units are very clunky, so you can block each other. They can't get out of surrounds, so you can 4-point surround stuff. And there's like almost a beauty and a nuance to the old style of how units interact with each other. So I'm wondering what your guys' thoughts are on stuff like that, like retaining that old nuance from games like Brood War and Warcraft 3, but still having it in like a new engine like StarCraft 2, which feels so fluid and nice when you're first starting off, a sort of mixture of both, or sort of going with more of a new style.
I will say like it's really important, especially coming from players who started in the Brood War or Warcraft 3 camps. Is my mic on, by the way?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Coming from the Warcraft 3 and Brood War camps, to have depth of micro in that there are these like kind of small tricks that are not really inherently in, like they're not inherently designed to be in the game, but they just happen to be in the game. And it increases the potential for micro. So in Brood War, those examples are patrol micro with Mutalisk, for example, and clumping up Mutalisk. In Warcraft 3, that's blocking, and that's 4 points around, for example. But we want to do it in a way that that's something that we're interested in incorporating in our game, but we want to do it so that it's more intention. So just your idea about blocking and 4 points around, like this random idea I had was like, what if we made pathing for our game work like StarCraft 2 for allied units, but maybe it works like Warcraft 3 for enemy units. So you still have the fluidity when you control your army in the game, but you also have the potential to have these like cool micro tricks or cool micro surrounds. There's some potential problems with that idea, but it could be a potential solution as well.
Yeah, like Kevin was saying, I think there's a lot of, when we play every RTS game out there that comes on the market, but we also look back a lot at influential RTSs that maybe have older interfaces for sure. And we see a lot of times that there are happy coincidences, that there are things that just shook out of maybe the tech limitations or whatever that the game was facing at the time that wound up being integral to the gameplay nuances about how harvesting works or how units behave in these circumstances or whatever else. And we don't necessarily want to go back and copy things like that because those were again kind of coincidental things. But like Kevin's saying, we want to identify nuances that we think contributed in a good way to gameplay and then find a way to approach those more intentionally and find a way to actively embrace those. We don't want to just look back and copy something because the games and UI have improved so much over the years. I don't want to go back to, placing slabs of concrete like in Dune or Dune 2 didn't even have drag select, right? So like as the UI has advanced through RTS's history, there's a lot of stuff that gets lost because I think people have not consciously tried to maybe replicate the feel of something in new systems, and it's just been kind of lost as the UI or the frameworks for the gameplay have advanced. And I think for us, we're definitely looking at key feels in games, from economy to resourcing to pathfinding, and want to find a way to get those nuances into our game.
So I think every game developer must have a very specific vision and design in mind, and they cannot stray too far away from that, otherwise they betray themselves, sort of. But you guys have been very open about receiving feedback and I suppose incorporating that feedback. So my question is, with all those decisions you made for yourselves, how does that feedback fit into all those made decisions? And what systems were you unsure about that you allowed that feedback to influence?
Sorry, I don't want to talk over you, Tim.
Yeah, no
ready
worries.
to go?
I mean, I'll jump in and pass it over to you. I was just going to say, I think we're coming from a place of working on and being passionate fans of Blizzard RTS. So, like, as a starting point, I think that informs a lot of the initial vision for us. But we talked earlier about how even within the pantheon of Blizzard RTS, there's so much variety. And like Tim C coming from War 3, many of the rest of the team members coming from Star 2, we didn't enter into this with a specific decision made on a lot of these things. Even like we've talked about number of races, heroes as an example, or emphasis on 1v1 versus team play. I think we did identify that these are all big decisions that we have to make. And so to your initial question there, I think it's definitely true that some teams or game designers enter into something with like, this is what the sculpture is going to look like, and I just need to carve away the rest of the marble and get to that sculpture that I see in my head. And for us, we definitely know parameters and we know the inspiration that we're coming from, but we're not entering into this with that sense of it has to be this one way. And I think we could talk about it at big level systems. We could talk about it at small level systems. What we do know though is, Company of Heroes is a very different kind of RTS. Age of Empires is a different kind of RTS. Modern stuff, whether you look at Northgard or Their Billions, there are a lot of different flavors of what real-time strategy means, and we've played those other games and we love those other games, but what we are building is meant to follow in the lineage of Blizzard RTS. And what that means exactly, like we've even had to deconstruct that. What is it that makes a Blizzard RTS feel like a Blizzard RTS? I think we could drill down on that, but it is. I don't think we feel like we're betraying our vision by taking input. Like it's actually helping us make these kind of difficult decisions within the parameters of what we set going up.
Yeah, a little. Oh, go ahead, Tim.
No, go for it.
Okay, so a little anecdote I like to give is last time we did one of these big shows was the Pylon show, and on that show we said to the community, yeah, we were really looking for your feedback. Please go to our subreddit, similar to what we're doing here. And the very next day, the top 2 topics in our subreddit were, please have heroes and please don't have heroes in the game. And the third topic was actually those were the number 2 and 3 topics. The first topic was actually a screenshot of those 2 topics in a meme format where it's like Frost Giant says we want feedback from the community, and then the community : that screenshot. So like
from our community, it's pretty clear what we want.
Yeah.
So like it just goes to show like the very disparate amount of feedback that we get and how contrasting it is. And the way I think we handle feedback is we don't handle feedback in terms of just the message that's given, but number one, how the arguments are argued. Does it make logical sense? And also the number of people who really respond to these various arguments. So for example, on the topic of heroes, one argument that we saw really raised again and again was the idea that heroes have the potential to death ball. So for example, if we eventually decide, oh, we're going to have heroes in our game, this is something that we need to really pay attention to. We really need to make sure that that death balls are minimized as much as possible. So I guess like the core takeaway is like, no, we're not going to have heroes, and we're not going to have heroes because of this feedback necessarily, but we are taking into considerations of like what people like up or dislike about the various topics that we bring up, and try to address those issues independently.
Yeah, I think the best part of the community feedback, or at least for me personally, the part that's been most useful has been understanding the why. Why do players feel the way that they feel? We're not necessarily looking for just a popularity contest, vote for option A or option B. We're not blindly going to go where, just at the surface level, everybody says yes or no. We're going to get contrasting voices even within the Blizzard community, where just like with heroes, a lot of people love them, a lot of people don't like them. But what helped us was finding out why, right? And a lot of times the community can maybe identify threads feeding into their feelings about why they like or don't like things that we might not perceive, and that could influence absolutely how we prototype and test, and maybe what things we consider working into the design of the game. So the more information we get from the community, the more it helps us design the game to kind of meet the needs of what we're looking for, because at the end of the day, we're making this game for the core RTS community, the core Blizzard fans, and this is something that we believe can be more popular by bringing more players to this model, not by changing this model to something else. And hearing that sort of feedback from the community 100% factors in. But we're not just sitting here with a vision that we're going to do regardless of feedback, and we're not sitting here with no vision and just waiting to kind of go the way that everybody votes. It's in the middle. We have an idea of where we want to land. We have an idea for the type of feel and the type of play experience we want this to be. But there are a lot of different paths from here to there, and community feedback helps us identify which paths will fit right and feel the best.
So, does that mean that you are that you do not, to a certain extent, care about the backlash of the community? And that sounds very extreme, but to put it in a more exemplary term, so there's two options for you basically for the game: to include heroes or not, and there's different variants to do it. There's hero units with hero abilities, or there's the old school way of doing Warcraft heroes with like experience and items and skills. That is the ultra hero approach. So there's a certain variance that you can go by, but no matter how you do it, and I'm very sure you are aware of this, no matter how you do it, there's a certain player base you are gonna offend to a certain extent. If you go completely without heroes, only purely with units, you are very much gonna please the StarCraft community. And if you go more towards, the more you go towards hero-based systems, the more you're gonna what's the word? Alienate the StarCraft community. The more you go towards RPG. So my question is, and I don't know if you can answer that truthfully, but I'm gonna ask anyways. How much does that consideration influence game design as to how much you want to appease the community versus how much you know is right for the game?
Well,
You
yeah,
go, Tim.
Tim can by all means jump in afterwards, but I'd answer that by saying it absolutely matters to us how the community feels. It's one of the reasons why we wanted to engage the community to begin with, but ultimately we're building a game that we know some people are going to like, some people won't like aspects of it. We have to make the decisions that are right for the game so that it can be something which survives and thrives on the market for many, many years to come, like we're saying, and that people can build careers and businesses off of and follow for a long time. Like this is something that we absolutely want the community feedback in, but we know some decisions are going to be, hey, StarCraft fans might like this a little bit more, or Warcraft fans might like this a little bit more. And I think by trying to dig through community feedback to find why people feel the way that they feel, that's going to help us make the decisions that we make along the way match up better with where the community's wanted to go. We try to get out of the option A or option B voting scenario. We don't view it as heroes or no heroes. Not just going to copy Warcraft 3's hero model. We're not just going to copy StarCraft 2's commander model. We're not just going to not try anything. We absolutely want to explore in this area, and our exploration in this area should be influenced by what the community, what their concerns are, and what they like about existing models. So I would say to that model, yes, it's definitely important, but we are not blindly trying to appease audiences. We're trying to build a game that's great, and we have to make our decisions kind of in support of that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think this, like, you've kind of identified the game maker's dilemma, that as we start to make decisions here, inevitably, whichever path we choose, we're going to piss somebody off. They're going to be like, this is not my game because you made this decision that I disagree with. But to make the game, we got to make decisions, clearly. And so Heroes is a great one to talk about because, to Tim C's point, we don't want to just do a popularity contest. We want to figure out what's actually best. What is the most fun? What is going to bring the most players in? Like, what's the best? And so we gathered information to make sure that we're thinking about the right stuff. And absolutely, there were considerations that came up in that conversation that we didn't think of. So it was so useful to hear what people thought about Heroes. And we kind of chewed on it all, and we said, well, there's some really good stuff that could come out of having Heroes. And the truth is, I think in the discussion, it maybe was slightly more people who disliked the idea of Heroes than liked the idea of Heroes. So we didn't just make the popular choice. And we haven't firm decided, but what we said is, look, there's some really good benefits. We think we can mitigate some of the bad stuff, and we're going to try it. We're going to experiment. And that doesn't mean that we ship with Heroes, but what it does mean is that in our prototype, we're going to implement heroes and try some of these ideas that we have to mitigate the people raised, like snowballing, like the game becoming entirely about the hero.
I'm sorry.
And go ahead.
Did you just confirm that in your prototype there are going to be heroes?
In our prototype, we're experimenting with heroes. That's right.
Yes!
Yeah. And in fact,
Okay.
we with this discussion with the community, we're trying to be as transparent as we can be. So we posted recently and also in our newsletter that you can sign up for on our website. We said, hey, here's what we heard in terms of the feedback that we got from the community. These are some of the challenges. These are some of the potential benefits. And we straight up said, like, look, we're going to experiment with heroes because we think we can mitigate some of these challenges and these benefits sound really good. So if we try it and we're like, yeah, this is working, then we'll ship with heroes. If we try it and we're like, our ideas to mitigate just didn't work out, this is no good, it's possible that we cut. But that's kind of our process.
And
so
just to just kind of back that up a bit, or kind of reinforce that a bit, that's going to be our approach with a lot of different gameplay aspects. There's going to be a bunch of things, and this is not unique to Heroes. It could be in relation to number of races or gameplay mechanics or new unit types or things like that. We're going to be trying a lot of stuff that will fall by the wayside and we won't ship with. But I think we all see a lot of interesting positives and a lot of clear negatives that and potential ways to mitigate those negatives. And so there's definitely something worth exploring there.
Yeah, on the topic of upsetting the community, I think Tim M touched a lot on this, but by explaining where our thought process is coming from, we hope to kind of not necessarily convince people to our way, but at least give our players the understanding of, oh, okay, these are the reasons they made this kind of decision making. And we saw that have a lot of success when we posted balance patch notes, for example, in Star 2 and in Warcraft 3. If the designers explain what their thought process was, I think the community is generally more accepting of why these decisions were made if they can align with that thought process. And on the topic of heroes specifically, I think when a lot of Blizzard RTS players think of heroes, they think of War 3 versus Star 2. But I think reality, like Star 1 is probably the quintessential game that has no heroes, whereas War 3 is the game, I would say, in the entirety of RTS that focuses most on heroes without going into MOBA territory. So there's this spectrum, and there's this large area between these two games in which heroes can be implemented. Some of the games that were talked about in our subreddit that had heroes but weren't necessarily Warcraft 3, I'm going to bring up a list. They included Halo Wars, Dawn of War, Age of Empires, Age of Mythology, Company of Heroes, Battle for Middle-earth, Total Annihilation, Northgard, and Supreme Commander. There's so many games that have heroes that are not necessarily Warcraft 3, but implement them in a cool, unique way. And I think, like, again, when we say we might have heroes in our game, don't necessarily think, oh, this is exactly, and it could be like Warcraft 3 with hero leveling, with items, with creeping, and the whole shebang, I guess.
Yeah, pretty happy to hear that and looking forward to seeing how it appears in the game. I'm curious about the randomness / RNG, because it feels like in StarCraft, at some point, I think there was like a lot of like 2 players map in the map pool, and then it was like greatly reduced. There is no like item RNG. You don't even have so much spawn randomness because like you're either on like the maps are symmetrical and stuff. But in Warcraft 3, woo, sometimes you get the wrong matchup on the wrong map with the wrong spawn, and then you get all the wrong items. So I'm curious what your guys' stance on RNG. Like, do you again want to find some sort of middle ground? Do you think it's definitely required for this kind of game to make it more interesting?
I think some of the feedback we got is just that RNG can be done in a way that doesn't disadvantage one player over another player. So there can be variability in what happens, but that doesn't offset the fairness. I think the single thing that comes up every time we talk about RNG is fairness. And so I think this is another one where I'd love to hear what you guys think and what the community thinks, but it seems to me that at least in competitive esports, it's a very different situation when playing against AI, but at least in competitive esports that there's a desire for fairness. And I've heard, I don't know if this is true, that even you, Todd, have sometimes experienced some frustration over feelings of unfairness when it comes to RNG.
Yeah, that's the
Crystal ball, what?
consideration. That's the consideration we have to weigh, right? Because we want ultimately a fair game, but also I like some of the things that come out of RNG. I like that there is a different story that plays out each game, and each match is different in some interesting ways. And so I don't know what exactly we will decide to do in that space. But again, I don't think this is RNG or no RNG. I think this is looking at how we could use some elements of RNG in the right places to still preserve a fair experience, but allow some of the variability that leads to, from match to match, there being like just a different dynamic and a different story that plays out. That makes it more fun to play. It makes it more fun to watch and just exciting to follow.
Yeah, totally. I think it's not necessarily all RNG is good and all RNG is bad. I think it's a lot about the way you design RNG. I think like one example of bad RNG is a lot of times with spawn positions where it's close pond, turtle rock, and I don't think Night Elf has ever won a game versus human in that matchup. And that example is one in which like you have no agency and you just get screwed over, especially in the beginning of the game. I think the two key points are like it's so early on that you don't really have a chance to make any impactful decisions that impact how you react to the RNG. And I think that's to take it from a game that I used to play a lot, Hearthstone. That's one thing Hearthstone learned with the Discover mechanic. The Discover mechanic is essentially you get a pick of 3 cards or 3 choices when RNG hits. So, for example, when an item drops in Warcraft 3, you could get potentially a ring, a claw, or a circlet, and you, as the player, get to choose which one to pick. And I think that feels a lot better because you feel like this is skill testing. You know, like you get a chance to make a decision as to which item is best. And alternatively, another way to implement this in Warcraft 3 is, for example, to increase the sell item of the items. So you have more of a decision as to whether you sell this item or not. So if you get like a bad item, for example, I don't know, maybe the rings of protection +3, for example.
I mean, they're pretty
On
good,
an
right?
Archmage.
They're pretty good, right?
Maybe you can sell it for a higher price and get a similar value to as if you had like the claws or the circlet, for example. So yeah, and even like in RTS games, I think RNG is not viewed as entirely negative. For example, in Brood War, the idea of RNG of missing from high ground chance is seen as extremely positive in that it's one way for the game to reinforce the concept of defender's advantage. So yeah, I think RNG definitely potentially has its place in an RTS if it's implemented correctly.
To touch on the positive side of it as well, I would say from a spectator or someone who does commentary, maybe Todd and Rima, you might have different views on this. I think RNG can make games exciting, especially in the sense of Warcraft, different items not being up to the player. Like, oh, he was really far behind, but now he can sort of find a way back. That it makes it really exciting from a spectator point of view. And obviously, you don't want to tailor a game purely towards that, but I think if you go with just what the players want, you end up with this sterile, one race. Everything's a mirror matchup, chess isn't balanced because white always goes first sort of thing. And there comes a point when you need to sort of, I guess, take the leap and have a little bit of randomness in it, if I understand it.
Yeah, I think like
I've had this theory for a long time, and I've been lobbying for this for forever. And I
Here
know
we go.
some Blizzard people are watching, so I'm gonna harp on this as hard as I can. So I like the randomness of items in Warcraft. I'm sorry that we're hijacking the Frost Giant segment here, but give me just 2 minutes.
No, go for it.
go ahead,
Please.
lead balance designer.
Please.
Remo.
Please, like Kevin just mentioned a second ago, the discovery mechanic, in my opinion, is single-handedly the best thing that ever happened to Hearthstone, and I think the thing that saved Hearthstone by itself, the discovery mechanic, the fact that you have a selection of random things, of 3 random things in that case, that you can choose one from, and I think that could work wonderfully in Warcraft 3. In Warcraft 3, yes, RNG is a factor, and I think it's a interesting and unique factor that I think should be preserved to a certain extent. But there are those games where you play Archmage versus Archmage, or Blade Master versus Blade Master, whatever. And the one guy finds 3 claws and the other finds 3 rings. And it's kind of bullshit, you know, and that is taking it to the extreme. And my supposition is reduce the extremes and also increase player agency. Whenever you can increase player agency and make players make meaningful choices, that increases the skill ceiling and is always a good thing for the game, especially for good players. So my proposition is this: whenever an item drops, don't make it drop an item, but rather make it drop an item of level 1, level 2, level 3, whatever. Open a chest and give you one of two choices, and then you have two choices from the drop table. For example, claws or ring, or gloves or circlet, and you can choose one of those two. I think that would be a very good idea. That would make things, first of all, a lot more balanced, and secondly, a lot more interesting in terms of what build you can choose for your race, strat, and heroes. And thirdly, a lot less imbalanced in those rare scenarios where you find all the bad items versus the opponent who finds all the good ones. All right, that was my preach for Sunday,
This was your
although
TED
it
Talk.
is Friday. But I really do think that would be a great idea. But that would require some engineering and development and implementation from Blizzard. But I know you guys are all on that, aren't you? So yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to reading the patch notes.
to add to that, I feel like having RNG in Warcraft 3 is not the problem. It's just that it's, in my opinion, it's too extreme and not balanced enough. So like I said, sometimes it just everything is going the worst possible in terms of like spawning location, and then items can be very extreme. Like some items are really bad, some items are really good. In my opinion, there's a lot of work that could be done in regards to making that a lot more fair. It doesn't have to be like completely asymmetrical, like it's always 50-50 no matter what, but it's definitely way too imbalanced right now. Like some of the items and drops that you can get too extreme, and yeah, I've mentioned many times before that I think they should balance it more. There was some effort made and they tweaked a lot of the items, but it's still not enough in my opinion. So like to kind of elaborate or like go back to what I mentioned initially, I do feel like RNG has its place in the game, but not in as an extreme position as it is now in Warcraft 3.
I will say that some of the most exciting moments I've ever seen in Warcraft 3 are due to RNG. I think I saw a game a few weeks ago where a Night Elf player was definitely losing against the human, and he like double bashed the human heroes. He killed the human heroes with like bash bears.
Oh yeah,
It's always
that
human,
was
right?
Foggy versus Hog. Yeah, with the bash bear. Oh yeah, good game.
And then one of my favorite moments ever was a game on Secret Valley. Fav versus Lynn. It was called I like to call it the triple critical game, in which like one of the undead heroes TP'd and Lynn got 3 criticals in a row.
The Sword Saint on YouTube.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's what it's called.
Yeah.
But to that point, like I think a critical strike is actually an example of RNG that's done relatively okay. I think the excitement of the numbers popping up is really cool, but what a lot of people don't know about critical strike is that it actually uses pseudo RNG, and that every successive hit actually is not 15%. It's actually like something like 7, and then every time you don't get a critical hit, the chance increases, and over the long term, it adds up to 15%. So that's just an example of way to have RNG in the game to create excitement, but at the same time reduce the frustration for players, or at least reduce the potential of frustration for players, as we can see in the Sword Saint game.
But it still rounds out to 15% overall, right?
Yeah. So like for example, like if you don't get a critical strike 5 strikes in a row or 5 attacks in a row, the chance goes up to like 30%.
Yeah,
I mean, it's okay. We just have to reduce Lightning Orb proc chance on heroes to 5%, right, Carson?
Absolutely.
Like in the examples that you used, I'm sure you entertain a spectator, but I think you can see how if you're Fav or Hawk, you're like, I'm done with this game. Like, this is ridiculous, you know? Like, so there is always both point of views to consider. And as somebody who finds more ring than most people in Warcraft 3, like, I'm not always amused by the item drops, even though some of them have become memes that people enjoy.
I'd like to see one of your subscribers tally up your ring counts. Let's see if you actually are getting more
Sub
rings.
the counts right there.
You know, there's been this rumor going on in our chat, and from Neo especially, about the red camps dropping more Hood of Cunnings than anything else. And I've actually been keeping a notepad throughout all my casts called evidence.txt, and I've been manually tallying it up. And I can assure you, it hasn't been more hoods. The interesting thing is, it's been mostly Legion Doomhorn. And it's been very little Cloak of Flames, but it's only been like 50 or whatever. That was absolutely for nobody's benefit. I was just throwing that in there. Just
Well, there's a
saying.
there's a
Remo.
tight
Please go ahead.
there's a
glad you're here,
tightrope
Remo.
you kind of walk where like it's hard to know how much RNG is good because the people giving you the input, the players, always have that little sense of bias where, I'm only getting rings, I'm only getting, hoods of cunning sort of thing. So it's hard to get the actual proper feedback, I suppose, from a developer point of view of how much is too much, how much is too little, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Same with just race balance overall and unit balance. If you lose to something, it's too powerful. If you win to something, it's perfect. It's so. Yeah, we have to
Isn't
always
that right?
tailor that feedback based off of
Yeah.
the context of the experience it was given in.
Okay, so you guys touched on it a little bit already. The goal, to maybe become somewhat a big esports, but I would love to hear just a little more in terms of the prioritization. Like, is your goal first and foremost to make the best game that you can make, or is there already it's kind of a stupid question. I just don't know how to phrase this. I'm not a native English speaker, but how big of an esports or how important in terms of esports is the game for you already, even before you've begun development? I feel like your answer is going to be much better than the question probably for this. But yeah, like the RTS in esports currently, it has a certain place. We got Warcraft and Starcraft. So the long-term goal for Frost Giants game would be to be very high up there in terms of an RTS that you want to become as big as possible, or like, yeah, how do you see things basically?
Yeah, this one, I think we talked earlier just about the importance of esports to RTS, but also how the audience size, the player base, basically, the number of people who play these modes, there are more players who play non-competitive than who play competitive. So I think this is one where we're really trying to achieve an even balance between the two. We're not deprioritizing either, and we're also not trying to make one more important than the other. It's super important to us that we make a fun game that non-competitive players can enjoy, but to us, we will not have succeeded in our mission if we haven't also made a preeminent esport. And RTS has been such an important part of esports history, but it has remained relevant today. It's not like it's just grandpa's esport. It's like RTS esports are still the pinnacle of skilled competition in my mind, and we want to continue to be that. And it's very difficult designing something to keep two things equally prioritized. And this is something that we just have to maintain rigor on ourselves as a team as we progress. And certainly there will be moments in our development where we're focused on solving core mechanics just to get, the base gameplay going, where we're doing more playing against the computer than we are doing playing against other players. But we have to maintain this priority as a team. We have to continue to focus on esports as a component of what we're building. Tim and Kevin, what do you guys think?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of discussion within especially RTS communities around the watchability of esports, especially RTS. And I think to RTS's credit, it has a lot of advantages over a lot of other game modes, over a lot of other genres. For example, the supplies, as some might say, generally tell you who's winning. Also, the amount of map control players have, the amount of like red or blue in terms of player color on the screen kind of tells you how much territory they control, how many expansions they have. And that's another indicator of which player is winning. And that's especially so in StarCraft 2. However, I believe that like these kind of things, that the watchability of an esport is by many people, especially in the esports scene, overrated. I think like the first and foremost factor of like whether this is going to be a successful esport is the broad appeal of the game and our player base. And you can see examples such as League of Legends and Dota to this. Like, as a new player watching those games, you have no clue what's going on. All the heroes have these unique items. They have these unique skills. There's a lot of color flashing all over the map. It's completely inaccessible for new players. Even though I know like Valve tried to have these like newbie streams for players, like I was watching those and I'm like, oh, I still can't. It's hard for me to get into these. So I think like first and foremost, we have to make a great game. We have to make one that reaches a wide audience, and we can build an esport on top of that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was a great answer, Kevin. Esports is, very big, very important goal for us. Kind of along with a couple other goals that we have in terms of just being able to make a multifaceted RTS be really strong. So we have compelling stories, and we have great cooperative experiences, and we have excellent competitive play as well. But to get there, like Kevin's saying, there's dominoes that have to fall down in a certain order. To really have esports be successful, we have to have a massive audience. We have to have players, we have to have viewers, we have to have people interacting with an ecosystem that really feeds into the esports. And in order to get that level of player base, we have to build a great game. And so in kind of our view of development, it starts and ends with making a great game, because everything else builds upon that. Everything else feeds from that. So that's what we're entirely focused on right now.
Yeah. So another thing I want to add is like, even though I was more harping on the camp of like we want to make a great game first, something that we really focus on, and especially something that our art director Jesse focuses on, is the ability to pick out units from a map. I think that's like one of his pillars when designing the art style of these units. So I guess that's one way in which we really are catering to esports, and that we really want to make sure these units are all look distinct, and you can kind of like pick a grunt from a raider, for example.
All right, those were some great answers. Tim Morton, I believe you have to go. Sadly, you have to leave us, but thank you so much for joining us today. And do you have any shout outs or any messages for the community out there, like the Warcraft community or around Frost Giants?
Yeah, first shout out to you for having us on, Todd. Thank you so much for putting Frost Giant on your show. Deep gratitude to the community. I think if there's one thing you take away from us being on today, it's that we really do want to get active feedback while we're developing. And the Frost Giant subreddit is a great place to participate. Also, if you sign up for our newsletter through our website at frostgiant.com, that'll kind of summarize some of the design discussions that we're having and give you an update on what our thinking is on those things. But yeah, it's the community that's making this possible, so we're just super grateful.
Thank you very much, Tim. Have a good day.
All right, thank you.
Cheers.
Yeah. And by when I say I want players to be able to tell the difference between a grunt and a raider, I mean especially a raider from a huntress from a knight, and also from a militia from a footman, and a skeleton from a ghoul.
Yeah.
On the point of esports, this might be a little bit early to ask, but I'm just wondering what your thoughts on it. There's kind of two veins of that. There's the sort of organic, if you build it, they will come, sort of what Warcraft and StarCraft did, what like Super Smash Bros. Melee did. They just sort of built an esport from the ground up, and then, in scenes like Counter-Strike and stuff, you have Flashpoint and ESL, which do all the tournament hosting, and then you sort of have the Overwatch League side of things, or I think League of Legends does it as well. Valorant's doing it, where it's sort of a top-down, the game dev funds and starts their own sort of league. And there's issues with both sides of it, but I'm wondering if you guys have a philosophy one way or the other on how you'd like to build the esports side of things.
I would say it's just actively being discussed. We haven't committed one way or another, and some of us, like one of our core founding members, she came from within Blizzard's esports. So we have people with direct experience with a lot of knowledge of this, and we're actively talking about it. Like you're totally spot on to say that there's two different models, and there are definitely different pros and cons of it. But I would say this is something that we're just still discussing, and it's just too early to have a decision on it.
So we have talked a lot about difficulty in RTS and how to bridge that and how to overcome it. One way that StarCraft 2 attempted to tackle that issue was with game speed. which in my opinion was really weird because it gave you a different kind of feel to the game when you learned it as opposed to when you were supposed to actually know it. Maybe that's something just for me personally, but for those who don't know, when you started playing StarCraft in campaign, unless it was brutal, it was slowed down. So it was like, I don't know, 75% of the normal game speed or whatever. And then when you jumped into multiplayer, it got significantly faster when it was more demanding. Um, as I said, maybe it's just me that always felt pretty lazy and clumsy to me. What's your view on that strategy? Are you going to implement something similar or something else?
Okay, I feel very strongly about this one. So I'll take this one. So coming from the StarCraft 2 team, back even when we were in StarCraft 2 and not with Fragile or anything, one thing that we constantly talked about was that, oh man, if we ever make a new RTS, we are never going to have multiple game speeds within our game. Because as frustrating and as confusing it is for players, it was way more confusing for the devs because we had to like always, like the players, do this like math of like, oh, is it 40 seconds or is it 40 divided by 1.4, right? And not only is it so, one thing players might not realize is that in the various game modes of StarCraft 2, the game speeds are actually work differently. So, for example, in co-op, the game speeds are actually displayed in real time, whereas in multiplayer or in versus, they are displayed in like what is called Blizzard time. So, like even though like a Marine takes so even though a Marine takes like 15, like let's say I think it takes 18 seconds to build, it will display differently, even though they take the same amount of time to build between the two different game modes. So I will say, like, if I will fight as hard as possible to make sure that we don't have different game speeds in our game because it was a nightmare. And I feel like it was mainly there because it was vestigial from StarCraft 1. StarCraft 1 had it, StarCraft 2 is the sequel to StarCraft 1. So why not? Another like thing that about the various game speeds in co-op especially is that um, the way co-op was designed, the lower two levels, which were casual and normal, worked at a different game speed than hard and brutal. And we had this thing where if one player queued as normal and the other queued as hard, players would be able to match with each other in order to smooth the queue times. But what happened there is players who queued as hard would be forced to play at the slower game speed, and it was just really like convoluting and really frustrating for those players as well. So for all these reasons, I vow I will never work on a game with multiple game speeds.
Yeah, it just seems like a very lazy way of making a difficult game easier for new players. Not meaning to shit on anybody, but it seems very dumb, honestly. Sorry.
Well, I'll say like we learned a lot over the past like 10 or 20 years of RTS design, and like what seems obvious right now is largely because we collectively have millions and like billions of hours not only playing RTS games but watching other people play RTS games. StarCraft 2 is like I would say the last big RTS that really like made a huge splash in terms of monetary value, but we haven't really seen like a really big RTS since then. And I think there's so much potential for innovations and from learnings, especially in this very digital age of like Twitch streams and like widespread esports that we can incorporate into our game or any future RTS that comes along.
This sort of thing is the blessing and the curse, I think, of working with an established franchise too. On CNC, there were definitely things that were just entrenched legacy. They were considered unchangeable, part of the franchise, just things that had to carry from one game to the next. Blizzard's franchises are no different. There are things that might not even be fully understood by new dev teams, but they were part of the original, so let's carry them forward. And who knows for what reason that decision was made way back when. If it's just carried forward, kind of part and parcel is just part of the franchise. It gets replicated without really a lot of thought into it. I mean, what you're describing sounds really frustrating. I would imagine for the dev environment. We had this similar conversation the other day about why all the workers were levitating. All they hover around and Kevin, I don't know if you want to
Yeah,
talk
like
about that.
I was talking about how in Brood War, basically workers have this like hovering mechanic, or they visually hover, and I'm like, oh, that's actually because it's like related to balance, and that spider mines are not able to target those workers. So like it's something people don't think about, I guess. But like one of the coolest opportunities for me as a fan coming into Blizzard and getting to talk to these OG developers like Tim from Warcraft and a lot of people from the original StarCraft 2 team is I get to ask a lot of these questions of like, hey, why did you do it this way? And a lot of times, surprisingly, the answer is like, oh yeah, huh, that was pretty dumb.
Yeah, pretty much. We're just winging it all the time.
Worked out pretty well.
So, about game design in modern times, it seems like for especially multiplayer games, from what I've been able to observe, something that a lot of titles focus on is objectives. Something that the team or the player has to work towards to get closer to victory, right? That's objectives. And that's something that, for example, StarCraft never had. There's expansions, but you don't have to take them to win, right? In Warcraft as well, there's expansions, you have to take them to win. In Warcraft 3, I like to refer to creep camps as soft objectives, something you can take, and it helps you, definitely, but you don't have to take them to win. But modern games, like especially the closest thing that's closest to us with RTS is MOBAs, where there's clear hard objectives. You have to take the towers, you have to take the barracks, you have to take that to win. I imagine that's a core decision to make in your game. Objectives, how much of a role are they going to play in your game? Have you made a decision as to that, or is that still part of discussion?
Yeah, I'd say we haven't made a hard decision on that. I think it would depend a lot in terms of game mode and in terms of what we're trying to accomplish with those game modes. Generally speaking, I like to really allow for players to have varied strategies and to be able to surprise us with how they approach missions or modes or whatever with how they play. And that generally is give them more freedom, give them more choice in what they do and in what order they do, which is generally geared towards less objectives. At the same time, objectives, especially for new players, could be a way of directing how they're playing and helping them understand what they should be doing at the right time. So there are definitely pros and cons to them, and I think that's something that we would use in varying degrees in different game modes to just help structure things for players.
Yeah, I think objectives add a lot of interesting advantages. For one thing, I think this is especially true in StarCraft 2, is it's really hard to gauge whether you're winning or not in a StarCraft 2 game. Like oftentimes, like I don't know if you've ever felt the sense of like you're fighting, like you have this huge army and like you feel like you're fighting tooth and nail for like this little bit of territory, and you go into your opponent's base and you feel like you barely win, but then you take a look at the replay and you are like up like 50 supply the whole time, right? And I think like one thing objectives add is like kind of like point markers in terms of like, oh, I hold 3 objectives, I have 3 points in the game versus my opponent's 2 objectives. He has 2 points in the game, and it kind of gives a sense for players of like who's winning. And I think one game that does this like fairly well is Company of Heroes. So we've actually seen examples of RTS games that kind of incorporate this kind of mechanic. And even in StarCraft or Warcraft, I would argue there do exist objectives in the game. For example, mana fountains and health fountains and shops and merc camps. And also in StarCraft 2, the idea of watchtowers. One thing we did learn in StarCraft 2 design about watchtowers and a lot of these map objectives is that sometimes they allow players to win more, in the sense that if you hold this watchtower, you have and for Warcraft 3 fans, a watchtower is a map objective in the middle of the map where if you stand a unit next to it, you get vision of the surrounding area.
Like a sentry ward.
Oh yeah, like a sentry ward. And one problem we found with this mechanic is that it was win more in that these watchtowers were usually placed in the middle of the map. And one way in which players could come back into the game is by circumventing vision and doing like a drop in like the back of a player's base. And watchtowers prevented players from doing so. So what we got from those learnings is we tried to encourage map makers to place towers in areas that were less in the middle of the map and more towards the side. So players were more able to control their own towers and gain vision of their bases rather than in the middle of the map where the winning player tends to control those towers and snowball the game from there. So yeah, a lot of cool things with mapped objectives that we can explore. One final thing is I think objectives allow players a way to, it reinforces the idea of territory control in an RTS. And that's something I personally care a lot about. And one thing that I think Warcraft 3 lacks a bit in that, yeah, you kind of care about your main base. You kind of care about like maybe if you have an expansion and like, yes, there is some idea of like you want to control the creep camps on your side of the map and your opponent's creep camps perhaps. But other than that, I feel like scouting where your opponent is on the map or like knowing your opponent's movements are slightly less valuable than in a game like StarCraft 2, for example, where lethality is high and the number of bases you have in the game directly represents like how much power you have, and as you expand you have to defend more points and you gain more territory, and you're scattered throughout the winds basically.
I'm personally very skeptical and not a big fan of like those hard objective games where like you have to capture a point and then keep it. It's very snowbally. I think that's like what you were getting at. Like if you once you have a bunch, it's like almost impossible to lose from there. And I feel like if you watch a StarCraft 2 game, like there's fog of war. A player might not know how many bases exactly the opponent has, but you're supposed to kind of have an idea. And maybe that's because I'm a really hardcore guy. I was like pro gamer on both games, so I always think in terms of like super competitive. But I feel like when I watch like a Serral or Showtime and I see their super deep understanding of the game, where like I'm seeing the whole map, but it feels like they're seeing it too, because like they're so smart and they know exactly like how many Archons 10 gases on the Protoss, is gonna mean and stuff. I feel like that's fascinating, and like you don't need to see more than that. And it's gonna be like for the commentators to try and translate that in their commentary in esports tournament. But yes, when you're playing the game, it might be harder. But with RTS, usually taking expansions and building a big army is the main objective already that I'm seeing, like that they all have in common. And then you have to eliminate the opponent. It's usually like the end game, which comes through fighting the armies. So yeah, not so much a question, just more like how I feel about objectives. And I feel like there's been a few games out there that have been released with like hard objectives, like you need to control this, control that. And I've been none too impressed by these. So yeah, personally, I'm not so much in favor. I don't know about you, Carson and Remo, like what you would think about this.
Yeah, I think that's the cool thing about Warcraft, though. There's not just gold and lumber. In StarCraft, it's like minerals and gas, right? In Warcraft, also you build your army out of gold and lumber, yes. And the higher tech you are, the more lumber it costs. Although gold is the most important, lumber is required the more higher tech you go. But it's not just those resources. It's also experience. Experience first and foremost for your heroes to level up. The more experience they have, the stronger they are. And it is magnificent differences. Level 1 hero versus level 3 hero is a giant difference. And then also supply comes into account. For example, heroes cost 5 supply, which at level 1 seems appropriate. But if a hero gets to level 5, level 6, then suddenly it's greatly inflated. So heroes are, of course, the backbone of your army. So it's not just about those resources, gold and lumber. It's also about experience from creeps, and then on top of that it gets amplified with items, and items are this massive RNG factor that a lot of people are averse to, and I can understand it, but it also gives depth. And I earlier outlined how we could reduce RNG in terms of a discovery mechanic, but that is beside the point. I think it's really cool how that gives more depth to the game. It's not just about 2 resources that can be gathered, but it's also about experience for your heroes, which is a resource. I suppose not exactly a resource, because you can gather it, experience, but you can't spend it. I don't know what you call it. It's sort of a resource. It's like a pseudo resource, whatever. But it gives more depth and more nuance to your gameplay. And I think that's really, really cool. That's not something that a lot of StarCraft players, I suppose, would agree with, but I think it's a very interesting concept for RTS in general, that you move away from just gatherable resources, but incorporate something that can be gathered from soft objectives, creep camps in the case of Warcraft 3 on the map, or, and this is the most important thing, killing enemy units. I think in many games, like StarCraft 2, there's not necessarily always enough incentive to kill enemies. Oftentimes it's just fine if you just sit back and just just turtle and camp and wait. Like I remember StarCraft 2 Wings of Liberty goodie days. You sit on 3 bases, you wait until 200 supply mech, and then you move out, and then let's see if those tanks roll through or not. But in Warcraft 3 you are greatly incentivized to move out on the map, creep the map, get experience, get levels, and then contest with your opponent for experience. And Kevin, you mentioned there's not so important in Warcraft 3 necessarily always to control terrain on the map, and that is true to a certain extent, but on the very highest level, when it's about getting as much experience and creep camps as you can, then on that level, it is extremely important to know where your opponent is, where you are, how strong you are versus your opponent, and how you can abuse your moments of strengths and weaknesses versus those of your opponent, and then min-maxing your way to victory through primarily experience. I think creep camps and soft objectives via creep camps are honestly a genius design from Warcraft 3 to encourage map interaction that probably in 2002 was never meant to be this intricate and advanced, but it developed to be that way because on the very highest level, it is about every single camp and every bit of experience you can grab, you versus the opponent, and your knowledge of that meta versus that of the opponent.
Yeah, I think anything to sort of avoid standing still, not only just for the player, but for the spectators as well. Anything to increase movement on the map, anything to give incentive to go around on the map. I think in Warcraft, if you guys are talking about, the prototype will have heroes, I think creeps are kind of a good idea, but there maybe is almost too much of an advantage to getting them. I don't know what your guys' thoughts on it, because not only do you get items, not only do you get experience, but you also get gold from them. You get, watch rewards, Turtle Rock we were talking about earlier, stuff like that. I'm wondering if you guys like the idea of creeps as an objective, but maybe with like less of an advantage to be gained from them, or if you have any ideas for sort of advantages and goals tied to that hero concept.
I will say, I think one of the biggest advantages of the idea of creeps and experience overall is that it drastically increases how well free-for-alls work in Warcraft 3 compared to StarCraft 2 or StarCraft 1 even, in that you do have incentive to go out on the map. You do have incentive to engage with the people next to you. Whereas in StarCraft 2, if you ever played a free for all, it's basically people turtling till they're maxed and getting their like you mentioned, Goody getting the maximum 200 supply of tanks and rolling across the map. And free for all, in fact, was so unpopular in StarCraft 2 that the ladder was deactivated. Where I believe it's one of the more popular modes in Warcraft 3, or even to this
Oh
day.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll lead by saying I don't know what we're going to do in this yet for our game, but I personally am a huge fan of creep camps and what they do for gameplay. If I was to go back and do it again, I probably wouldn't approach them exactly the same way as they were in War 3. But I think there's a lot of good things. I'm, as a designer, I constantly look for ways to bring players into conflict with each other. That's really at the heart of this game, and we want players to fight early, fight often, and fight in varied locations. And creep camps helped do that. And it also led to interesting conflicts that weren't just player versus player, but were two players duking it out in the middle of one of them taking out a creep camp, or somebody trying to steal items from somebody else's fight against creeps. And it leads to all sorts of interesting, non-standard conflicts in different locations, and at the same time encouraging players to come out and interact with the map and potentially bump into each other and fight early. So yeah, I love what comes out of it in terms of just getting players to fight early and often all over the map against each other.
Okay, let's start reading some of the questions. What's up?
I have one more. Sorry, Todd. I know.
Okay, not for 15 minutes this time.
This is the last one. So a lot of online games have seemingly the view of just pushing online multiplayer and co-op and tutorial guides from community, yada, and seeing or viewing that a campaign is outdated. How do you stand on this topic? Is campaign outdated to you? Will you have a campaign? Do you have a final decision?
Yes, we will have campaigns. No, it's not outdated. It is one of the four major pillars to us in terms of player experience that we want to make sure is really strong in our game. We have an exceptional writer working with us already on ways to approach world design and ways to approach lore and ways to approach stories so that we have just a really engaging world to kind of peel back the layers on as you play the game. And campaign is a big part of how players can learn the IP. With StarCraft 2, for example, or Warcraft 3, in both cases, those were long established IP. People came into it already with an awareness of what the world and universe is like. And so there are a lot of benefits to being a sequel in a very successful long running franchise. And for us, we're building a new IP from scratch. We want players to learn this game world and come to love it. And the way to do that is not through just head-to-head matches, but it's through campaigns. Now, that said, I think, and I've spent a lot of my career building RTS campaigns, I think there are a lot of innovations we could do within how we approach campaigns to make them stronger, to make them more interesting, and to tell stories in different ways. And just kind of pointing back to the Orc campaign in Frozen Throne, like that was one idea that we were able to run with in terms of trying to build a campaign where instead of a linear progression of mission to mission to mission that you would go through once, having a series of interconnected missions that you would go back and forth between. And that was one really interesting idea that I'm grateful to have had the chance to try out in the Frozen Throne. But there are many more ideas like that that we would like to try in campaign. So that's an area that it's near and dear to my heart. I want to make sure that we do something special in.
Yeah, well, not only do we have such an excellent writer, we also have an excellent ex-lead campaign designer for one such game you might have heard of called Warcraft 3. In all seriousness, I think Warcraft 3, and I told Tim when I first met him, I think Warcraft 3 is like, if not the best campaign, at least the best RTS campaign of its time. Like, I think it was so revolutionary that it was leaps and bounds above anything that had come before it. And I think every RTS campaign that followed it kind of tried to replicate its success. I actually play the campaign probably about once every year in the last like 20 plus years that it's been out. And I like it that much. I think it's such a great way also of like introducing the lore of the game lore that is so impactful that it reaches to such a big game as WoW these days. And so, yeah, just overall, like if we have this guy, okay, he's probably not in the same position on
He's above you.
On my screen,
this guy. We're definitely going to have a great RTS campaign.
No pressure. No, thank you. You're too kind. I mean, we had a lot of really good designers working on those campaigns, but the thing that I loved was that we were able to really try to do interesting new things. That not a lot of companies and not a lot of projects allow you to do that. I've been on projects where it's just crank them out, right? You have a fixed amount of time, just crank them out. It becomes like color by numbers. But with War 3, we really tried to push mission to mission. There being a lot of variants, a lot of new experiences, and a lot more story than we'd been able to tell before. And so we're still figuring out what objectives we're going to set for our own campaigns, but I want to make sure that we're pushing boundaries the same way that those campaigns did.
Okay, so let's start reading some questions we got Twitter and Reddit. We've already answered most of them, so it's very few of them that I feel are like still valid on stuff that we haven't brought up, if hopefully I was paying attention enough. So the first one is from Tower Taker, who says, handsome Remo picture, haha. Ask them if they plan to include some team modi like in StarCraft in which you can play one race with two people. I really like that in the early days to play with friends. I think he means Archon mode maybe, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, Archon mode.
That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah. So do you guys have any plans for something like that perhaps?
We've talked about it. It's definitely on the table. I wouldn't say we've committed to it or not, but we know a lot of players like it. It's definitely a mode that's been popular over the years. So it's definitely something that we may do.
Yeah, it's also seen a resurgence in the StarCraft community, StarCraft 2 community recently, which is really interesting. And we're trying to like draw some lessons for why that is right now.
We had Fresno to Minneapolis asked, For a new RTS from Frost Giant, will there be Mac compatibility? It might be a little early to say, but he says Apple person till I die, and I would love to work on one of my computers the same way StarCraft/Warcraft do. Thanks.
I would love to say yes. I just
Yeah.
don't know the exact answer yet. But no, I love that the Blizzard RTS games have had that compatibility in the past. I think it was, it's not a massive audience, but I think it speaks to Blizzard valuing that audience and players being able to play regardless of what type of computer they're using. And so, yeah, I think it's something that would be great if we can support it. We'll just have to see if that's in the cards.
By the way, is Taker only asking that question because he only wants to build towers while the other person plays the rest of the game?
Probably yes, most definitely. So Joe Dude It asked, is it true that upkeep was invented because computers of the day weren't powerful enough for large armies? That's a very interesting question. I don't know if you guys will be able to.
Indirectly, yes. It was a lemonade out of lemon situation. We absolutely had performance challenges on computers back then, especially with it being Blizzard's first 3D RTS. We had problems with trees. We early on had maps without trees, and then we had trees that were not interactive, and then we had interactive trees, but only 10 of them on a map. And then we eventually were able to get as many trees as War 3 had. But that was a journey, and unit count was similarly really problematic for us from a performance point of view. So we needed to look at a way to limit it, and ideally not by just saying you can only have 20 units. We wanted to find something which actually interacted with gameplay and could have some positive benefit and could encourage different play styles rather than just being a hard cap. And so we tried out a bunch of different things and eventually wound up with upkeep, where we felt like it was definitely encouraging a lower unit count in a way that helped us performance wise, but it also had interesting wrinkles that affected gameplay in different ways that players could take advantage of.
Pretty interesting actually in China, where the game was, where Warcraft 3 has been the most popular historically. The game remained popular for a very long time, even after its most glorious days, I would say. Part of the reason why is because a lot of the students that played the game very actively, they were playing it in internet cafes where the computer weren't updated very regularly. So even as newer games came out, and I think it's part of why maybe StarCraft also wasn't as big in China, is because the game didn't run as well on computers, and I guess people were already into Warcraft 3, so they're just kind of stuck with it. And Drunken WC3.
I just really quickly, I just want to say that last question was an a lot of game design, a lot of the challenge of game design is being presented with constraints, and then figuring out how to make fun happen within those constraints or turn those constraints to serve the greater gameplay objectives. And we face those every project I'm on. War 3's just happened to be right when graphics cards were going through huge leaps and computers were going from 2D to 3D. That was unique to it. But every single project I'm on, we're facing some sort of constraint on the hardware side, and we have to find a way to bend it to our will. And yeah, that was, I think, a more successful one. But anyways, I just wanted to say that was a great question and something that game designers have to face a lot.
Yeah, and to add on to that, like I think one of my biggest eureka moments as a designer is I learned that there's a saying like perfection is the enemy of great, and I learned that like there are some things that you can put into a game that are not necessarily like it has the most perfect edges. It's not like the most elegant, but it can improve the game overall. And one thing we added from StarCraft 2 that's an example of that is shield battery overcharge, in which it is an ability that has rough edges. It's a little wonky at times, but I think it drastically increased both the play of the game and the watchability of the game, especially for the PvP matchup.
So Tim, since you just mentioned it, as is part of every generation, every project, what are the technical constraints that you are seeing for your newest game at Frost Giant?
Oh, interesting. I would say we're not hitting technical constraints just yet. Fortunately, we will absolutely, but we're still in the mode of making core technical challenges and kind of starting from a blank slate. So yeah, we are deciding on approaches to networking. We're deciding on approaches to pathfinding. We're deciding on a kind of core technology choices, which will eventually be what hamstrings us later in development. So we're making the decisions that will haunt us down the line. So future Tim will have a lot to tell you on that front, but right now, fortunately, we're not constrained terribly.
So this is a question that came back a lot, so like everywhere all the time, other than probably the most asked, other than World Heavy Heroes in the game, is it going to be more like sci-fi StarCraft or fantasy like Warcraft, which Drunken asked.
Yeah, that a great question, and something we're still working on. We started off by getting some different writers to help us. We started off by throwing together kind of top level ideas for a bunch of different universes, and really just work our way through what elements sticking, what elements are we liking, and all of that stuff. Now that said, Warcraft dominates fantasy, StarCraft dominates sci-fi. The decision for us is how close we really want to go towards either of those spaces versus how much do we want to target our own space, which is different from them, and try to own that category as well. And so we're figuring out. It's kind of hard because besides historical, sci-fi, and fantasy, those are the main RTS. I guess thematic genres, subject matter genres that they have, and so yeah, finding out exactly where we're going to land in there it's something we're going to be working on for quite a while, I think.
I'm sorry, I don't know if you guys. Excuse me.
Sorry, I was just going to say the nice thing is that's a little bit divorced from the stuff we're working on right now with the technical skeleton of RTSs. We're working on getting units to move around, regardless of whether those are cowboys or dinosaurs, right? Like we're working on things that are that are more
cowboy
fundamental
versus dinosaurs. There you go.
There you go. That's your headline, right? But we also don't want to rush on the IP. This IP is something that needs to support an audience of the magnitude that we're talking about and capture people's interest for decades, right? Like this is something that is a really, really big deal. So we're not just rushing in and saying, you know what, boom, I've worked on Warcraft 3, it's fantasy, or these guys have worked on SC2, it's sci-fi. We're really trying to consider all angles.
So one thing that the player community has been wondering about as well heavily for this game is what is the game mode player number wise gonna focus on, because viewing multiplayer experience over the last decade really has been focusing all about team play, team experiences. So have you guys made a final decision as to whether the game is going to be focused on 1v1, 2v2, 3v3, or is that still up for debate?
Yeah, not decided on, and I don't mean to be coy or vague there, but just it's something that we're going to be iterating and experimenting with. We have great respect for the pure skill 1v1 competition that has been the mainstay for SC2 especially. Huge respect for that. We also see there being a lot of fun experiences in co-op commanders for SC2, and we love the idea of teams. So but even within that, say we wanted to go ahead with teams, are those teams of 2? Are those teams of 3? Are they like, what player count is that? It's just too early to tell. But we're going to be trying, I think, all of the above as we prototype.
Okay, so questions from Reddit now. We had Stringy31 asked, thoughts on in-game tournament supports? If so, how in depth? WC3 automated tournaments, Dota 2 compendium style crowd supported tournaments. That's it.
Okay.
Kevin, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, okay. I would say like throughout the history of Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2, like we've tried definitely various tournament schemes. And I get the sense that that Warcraft 3's tournaments were slightly more popular and successful relative to StarCraft 2's. At least they were talked about more within their respective communities. But honestly, this is a topic I haven't had too much thought on.
Okay. Sophides asked, I know Monk, Kevin, in particular, really got a lot out of the world's editor in Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2. What do you guys think about how important these editors are for the long tail of the games? Follow-up, it's my perception that the StarCraft 2 editor never quite had the relative success that the Warcraft 3 editor did. Do you guys have any insight into why that might be?
Oh yeah. Go ahead. No, you start, Tim.
Well, I'll let you talk about the SE2, the second part of the question there. But this is an area that I feel strongly about, and it's definitely close to my heart. I spent the first half of my career building RTS content, building content using editors like this. I was directly involved working with the programmers to create the interface for the Warcraft 3 editor, which really set the stage for all sorts of mods being created out of it and really successful modes like MOBAs and tower defense and other subgenres coming out of it. And it is something I believe in wholeheartedly. It's not just a matter of making development more efficient, although it does benefit that having a polished editor, because iteration speed and the ability to try out ideas is key to getting solid designs. But I'm a believer in the community becoming co-authors of this game experience with us. I started out, before I was a developer, making Doom WAD files and making maps that I would play with my friends, and using Warcraft 2's map editor to just do, really, in hindsight, stupid stuff, but primitive stuff, but just having fun with it. And I believe that it's critical for us to really be successful long term, that we provide players an easy and entertaining way to create and share content, and that is totally dependent on having a solid editor that players can build content with.
Yeah, I think having a solid editor definitely expands the lifespan of a game. We can see that very clearly from Warcraft 3, in which, like, yeah, I was mainly a fan of the 1v1 or like the esports experience, but I also played a ton of custom games, and I felt like those custom games help keep me in the ecosystem. And I'm sure for a lot of players, like, how many players do you know who bought Warcraft 3 just for Dota, right? And in terms of the Warcraft 3 editor versus the StarCraft 2 editor, the StarCraft 2 editor is way more powerful than the Warcraft 3 editor, I would say. And like, a lot of people give various figures on it. I would say it's on an order of like 10 times more powerful. However, the StarCraft 2 editor is also 10 times less accessible than the Warcraft 3 editor. So just an example, like back when I was a casual outside of Blizzard, like making my own stuff, like I was able to fairly easily get into the Warcraft 3 editor, make a few heroes, and call it a day. Whereas I came into Blizzard and I had to learn the StarCraft 2 editor from scratch. And after like 2-3 years, I still don't feel like I understand like half of the capabilities of what the StarCraft 2 editor has to offer. Not only is it like just more complex, but there's also not a lot of documentation out in terms of like how you use the editor. So a lot of how I learned was just honestly my coworkers teaching me directly in a one-on-one experience. Now, there are ways in which you can go online to websites such as SC2 Mapster, but they're definitely way less efficient. And I can't imagine how like an amateur map maker would be able to navigate that. And like, it's honestly amazing how we have such great maps in StarCraft 2, such as like Direct Strike, and those guys, like, I think are the real heroes. Another part of why I believe that StarCraft 2, I think, was less successful in terms of custom games is especially at the start of when StarCraft 2 was released, the lobby system was a bit confusing in terms of like, you couldn't like just host a game and have the game name be up there like how it was in Brood War and Warcraft 3. And not only that was that unfamiliar to a lot of players at the time, but also it was really hard to gain traction for up and coming maps. It was really hard to advertise them, and the same maps kept coming up over and over again. So I guess like just a huge storm of what I would call lessons that we've learned from these experiences.
Okay, this question, I guess we could all try to answer it, but if you guys don't want to, you don't have to. But like, I think me and Remo and Carson also can try and answer it. What are the biggest weaknesses of Warcraft 3 and SC2? Personally, I would say, as somebody that only ever played multiplayer and tried to compete, I would say balance pretty easily. But I don't know about you guys, Carson.
I think in one thing StarCraft 2 has done extremely well, that Warcraft, just because it's older, of course, this is why this has happened, but is really like spectator tools we've never had, and also stuff for, I do a lot of coaching in Warcraft 3, and then I watch people in StarCraft 2 do the same job, and I'm envious of what they have, being able to rewind replays, having a lot of like first person views and stuff like that. So something Warcraft didn't have, just because of the time it was released, is a lot of tools available for watching games and spectating games and having it like an esport side of things. I think even like Counter-Strike still doesn't even have a proper demo review thing. So I think it's something really common in games that could definitely be worked on, and Warcraft suffers from that. StarCraft 2, don't really want to say. I don't know. Didn't play it too much, so can't say. I've always been too bad at that game to comment on what it's lacking.
I think the biggest problem for Warcraft, StarCraft, whatever RTS you have is the new player experience. You have to take the new player by the hand because the experience is so damn daunting. The experience I always like to give for StarCraft or Warcraft, whatever, if you just played by yourself without any help, the first 1,000 games, in my opinion, that you play, you have absolutely no fucking idea of what you're doing. And there should be some system in place to help you with that. Whether it be custom game tutorials, which is something that StarCraft I think introduced like 3 years into release or something, which is okay, but it's too late. And also was only 11 maps, which is not enough. Or some kind of specific advanced campaign that teaches you about splitting and focusing and kiting, stuff like that. And in my opinion, most importantly, coaching system. An integrated coaching system into the game. You can design a custom game mod however well you like. The truth is, it's only going to be automated in the fact that it's just basic analog without interaction, where a player can go through the experience and finish the task, and it's going to be done with it. But no matter how complex your tutorial is, it's going to end at some point. The only way you can really help someone develop is with the interaction of another being. And we're not at the point of AI yet, where a computer can help you. So we have to do it with other people. So I think to really help a new player experience truly and meaningfully nowadays is via coaching. And it's something that is visible nowadays in Dota, for example, where it's not nearly as important because Dota is pretty straightforward. Honestly, you're playing with 5 people, you kind of hit creeps, you buy items, then you attack, whatever. In Warcraft 3, it would be so incredibly important. I've been making that case to War 3 champions for a long time. If you could sit in comms with a person to tell you, all right, but you know, his Blade Master is probably going to be level 2 by now. So remember, you want to buy the dust. And you're kind of low HP, so don't forget, you want to upgrade your Nerop Tower in the base. Shit like that would help you tremendously. Because if you get that audio input, it's going to have way more of an effect on you. And you're going to process it actively. And it's going to have a lasting effect on you. And you don't feel so lost. I remember my first 100 games, 1,000 games. I felt so lost. I didn't know what the hell to do. And I think this is the most detrimental part of the RTS experience, is that you play a game, you kind of have fun, sort of, although you don't know much of what you're doing. But you play the game along and you're kind of improvising. You don't know what you're supposed to do. And granted, I think some people enjoy that kind of experience, that are learning by their own ropes and they don't want to get interfered with much. But I don't think it's the case for the majority. I think the majority would like to have a coach by their side, or at least that is what I see. Perhaps I'm projecting, I don't know. I think this would be tremendously helpful if a coaching system was implemented where you could exactly, Coach Remo, where you could voluntarily say, hey, you know what, for the next 60 minutes, whatever, I want to be a coach. And I know how popular that's going to be. I know I would like to do it. I don't know how many other people would like to do it. But I think that would be the best system, and also a very social system of interlinking people. New players to more experienced players, not just for the purpose of them becoming better, but also for forming a community. So I think for RTS and also for Warcraft and for War 3 champions, I know you guys are watching, coaching systems, I think, are a massive, massive potential for the game and for any game.
You actually touched on one little thing just briefly there that I remembered about, something that like Diablo 1, Diablo 2, Warcraft before it went on BNet 2.0 did really well with sort of the communal aspect of things. You said, having interaction with people, Remo. That's something maybe StarCraft 2 hasn't done as well as Warcraft 3 did, is the clan system, the channel system. You click one button and you see the game name. You can click and see who hosted it. Just this more like community-oriented stuff that isn't just, I log on, I don't see anyone, I queue ladder, and then I see some anonymous guy with a barcode name. It's more like community-driven, just client overall, which I think Warcraft did really well pre-Reforged. It's still relatively the same, but not exactly the same feel as it once was.
Yeah, I personally love that system. I made so many friends on Warcraft 3 from clans and just chatting on BNet. And I would say, like, yes, I've made friends on Star 2, but it was mostly through just like DMs. And then we go to, back in the old days, we went to Skype, for instance. However, like, that's not to say like we should necessarily copy and paste Warcraft 3's old system or Brood War system, because I think like we really have to develop and evolve with the meta as it may, the technology at the times, especially right now when we look at the current landscape. Everyone and their mother has Discord. Discord is omnipresent, and like maybe there's a system, if we were to make it right now, I'm not saying we would, where we direct people towards a Discord channel, for instance. So I really think it's like, yes, we recognize, it's one of those situations where, yes, we recognize the advantages of what these older games had at the time, but we have to not necessarily copy them. We just recognize what makes them good and try to replicate what makes them good with the tools and the environment that we have now.
Okay, this should be the last one. From Floss 2x Daily.
The legend.
Yeah. I wonder if they know about WT Champions and it helps setting up a ladder down the line. We have best matchmaking algorithm made by math PhDs, global servers to give best cross-realm latency, dedicated as badass devs. So I would like first to explain a little bit, like I don't know if you guys will know everything about these guys, but when Reforged came out, there was no ladder, and then the community kind of decided to make one themselves, so that's them, WC Champions. And they've done the most insane job, in my opinion, creating a ladder with great matchmaking. There was only 3 servers, which I think was US West, Europe, like somewhere, I think Amsterdam, and then Korea.
Yeah.
They just added host bots. There was no Zoom feature on BNets for European and North Americans, only on NetEase. They've added Zoom feature into maps with the map editor. So they literally are adding everything that feels should have been there with Reforge, and they've done like such
hotkeys as well. They added all the custom hotkeys that aren't there that you have to do in the notepad.
They're literally adding everything that we've ever wanted. Like the UI is looking great in game. There's chat and everything of that. So I guess it's a good segue to ask if you guys, in terms of ladder, like what are you picturing, if anything, just yet, and if you might be looking to hire some people. I guess some of these guys might be available as well.
Yeah, I can start out. Like, yeah, I'm definitely very familiar and also very impressed with what Warcraft Champions has done for the community so far. They actually reached out to us to talk, and like we're like we talked to our client and network engineers, and we're definitely interested to hear their perspective, especially their very unique perspective on how like they implemented certain things. I personally play on War 3 Champions. Like I played 2s mostly on NA, but now that they I was talking with my 2s partner, like now that they have host bots, like we're thinking about queuing up on EU as well. So that's a cool opportunity. But yeah, I think like just overall, they have like, they're being very open with us, and like, it's not that often where you get to talk to developers of a ladder system or of a matchmaking system on a similar genre game, on how they develop their system. And it's just a really cool opportunity to communicate and collaborate on things going forward.
Yeah, we have a lot of respect for what they've been able to pull off, and I think, like Kevin was saying, hopefully we get the chance to talk with them and share thoughts and go from there. But I think they're also a great example of the power of the community, which is really important to us. And in terms of just seeing what can come out of the community is often so surprising. In terms of how much it can either exceed what developers are capable of or deliver different experiences that just help round out the game from what the developers have done. And so I love seeing that level of support from them. and I love seeing that level of engagement from the community. So that's definitely something that we're going to hope to support on our side as well going forward.
And we'll have a ladder on release.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yes, me
snap.
too.
Big words.
If that was what you were asking.
All right. Well, it's been fun. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us for this great discussion. Let's do some shout outs and then I'll let everybody go. We've been at it 3 hours, so time flies. So let's start with Carson. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It was really a privilege to be a part of this conversation. It's just really an honor to talk to you guys. So for Kevin, Tim, and other Tim, of course, thank you guys so much, and thank you for you've probably been asked a lot of the same questions on all these podcasts. So thank you for your patience with answering the questions over and over again. I look forward to playing the game. I'm still young in my prime, so I plan to go pro when the game is released. I promise you will see me there.
Juicy
Yeah.
and spicy and fresh, bro.
Yeah,
It's
juicy
no
and
problem.
spicy. Yeah, and just shout out to everyone in the community. Shout out to the StarCraft guys if you're watching too. Shout out to Team Dust. Represent, man. And yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you, Carson. Remo.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was pretty interesting, pretty informative. I hope chat and the viewers feel the same. If you want to hear more from me, check out at Remo Demo for all the latest Kinder Bueno trends. And yeah, that's all. Thank you guys.
Kevin. Whoever wants to go first, team.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you guys. I mean, we've been on here for, like you said, 3 hours. You guys are spending a lot of time with us, and I'm grateful for you guys to spend this much time with us and put us on. So this is fantastic. And to the larger community, like we really believe in RTS and hope that you guys just continue to play, continue to stay engaged in both War 3 and other RTS games that are out there. I think there are bright days ahead for the genre. Both from us and from other groups, and we just want to help carry the torch. So please stay strong, guys, and we'll do our best to live up to the expectations that you guys all have. And I encourage you to participate with us along the way. This is a shared journey, so definitely visit us on our Reddit and share your thoughts there. Sign up on our website for a newsletter, and we can at least get updates from us gradually as we go along. And really, please engage with our bi-monthly topics. We're going to be kind of delving into the details of nuances within RTS, and would love to get your thoughts on that. So please be a vocal part of this.
Yeah, for me, I just want to say, like, it feels great to return back to get in the scene of what I consider my OG game. I know the first time I met Todd, he accosted me for a Warcraft 3 tier list ranking of players, and for asking why he wasn't ranked 4th instead of 5th over Lynn. And when I met Reno for the first time, we played a game of Warcraft 3. More accomplishments, but yeah. So
we played on Echo Isles in Yinchuan in 2014. I didn't have custom keys.
I hadn't played the game in 10 years, so I think I got you beat on that. Yeah, those are like, it's great to get back to like these roots and get back in the scene and playing Warcraft 3 again. And I don't know how much the following resonates with Warcraft 3 audience, but finally, I just want to say, please cheer for us. We hope to make a good game.
Finishing with a meme, just like he started. All right, thank you so much, guys. It was a pleasure. Make sure to follow all of these guys. There's all the social medias there showing on the screen. I'll also list them under the video. Frost_Giant on Twitter as well. Much love, guys. And looking forward to hearing more from you and finally trying out the game sometime soon. Have a good day. Have a good evening. Much love, guys.
Thank you very much.